Do you want me to, I'll phone someone else and I'll get this block everyone. So, when I'm on this ask questions, okay.
You're all clear?
Anyway. Oh, there we go, you've got it.
Well done. Thank you. That's done better. Couple of notes. They're back on the air. Anyway.
Claire, can you just block the room that's talking at the moment? Are you able to just on Scotia just shut their mic down? Or Danica, one of you?
How much is that history way?
Corridor here, male and female. There's a water fountain just up near there as well. If anything terrible would happen and we needed to vacate the building, just the front of this building down that way is where we need to just congregate, and then the area warden will tell us where to go. That's probably the main things. We'll stop for a morning tea break, so we've got a few bits there. Might not be enough depending on how many other people turn up in a minute, but we'll see how it goes. So thank you. No worries. One quick thing I just did want to mention, Jenny Campbell was quite concerned yesterday that everybody was getting themselves into a bit of a flap about how huge this is. I think it's probably two ways that we're trying to tackle that. Partly it's actually trying to increase people's confidence and their capacity to help with these things, and having Brynn and Virginia here to help with that is fabulous. And for us to learn from each other, because certain areas like wax, like cars, are a long way, and actually Armidale area as well, there's a few areas that are a long way ahead, and we can learn from each other. But also trying to keep it in perspective. I think within each health service, and particularly some more than others, it's only a really small percentage of our patients as well. So I think we need to just be mindful that it's not going to be affecting everybody that we see. It's just a small cohort in some areas. Obviously state rehab service and areas like that is going to be a bigger chunk. But yes, really today learning what we can from these guys who are a long way ahead of the game for us, but also trying to keep it in perspective. So, thanks guys.
No worries, thank you.
I'm just going to stay up there in case.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. So we do have a lot of information and it is jam-packed, and absolutely the point is not to scare anybody off. But the reality of the situation is, and we'll go into how the Summer Foundation and Austin Health all came together around this, is that we've travelled all around the country. We've met with every single state and territory, the government there, the health services there, the NDIA there, and we've talked about what it's like and what health services need to do, and so we have that information now. And there's nowhere to get this information apart from having people who have done this and deliver it to you. So you can't go and Google what do health teams need to do to get people out of hospital with NDIA supports. It's just not there. And certainly there are some resources, specifically the Summer Foundation's coming out, and some health governments are putting things out. But I know from being a clinician on the cold face that all of that is helpful for about the first 30 seconds. And then we need to know, well, how do I actually do it? How do I actually make sure that people can get what they need in order to leave hospital? And that's what we're here to talk about today. So, yes, it is a lot of information. It's really dense information. If you walk out of here today feeling really overwhelmed and that you're at the bottom of a steep hill, that's probably true. But we're all there together. The NDIS is at that bottom of the hill. Every health service is, so that's okay. Don't beat yourself up. Just know all the things that you don't know now and slowly work over the next years to sort of develop that. But if you are feeling overwhelmed, please just speak up, ask us to slow down, repeat stuff, or clarify, because we don't want people to feel too out of sorts. So the Summer Foundation, as you may or may not know, is a national organization. Their head office is in Melbourne, but they work nationally, and their mission really is to make sure that young people aren't living in nursing homes against their choice. And they see the NDIS as a real opportunity to turn the lights out on that issue for good. And so when the NDIS came about, they offered these things called ILC grants, so information linkages and capacity building grants, to NGOs or different people out there in the sector to do things that need to be done in order to make the NDIS work. So the Summer Foundation saw this and said, great, we're going to put our hand up to work with health services nationally, because we are an excellent pathway to get to a nursing home for under 65. So we are the folks who are the step before people get there. And I'm a clinician. I've been a clinician for 15 years. I know that putting people in nursing homes against their will is extremely traumatic, and we're not sort of taking that lightly. Nobody wants to do it. It often is the path of last resort for these people. But the NDIS, the Summer Foundation said to the NDIS, look, I think we can really fix this problem through getting people the supports they need to get home and not go into nursing homes. So that's how the Summer Foundation came about. There's a summer housing branch where they help people find housing, and then there's all these projects that they're doing to help build capacity and keep young people out of nursing homes. So my name's Brynn. I'm the OT manager at Austin Health. That's a recent title. Of late, I've been the rehab stream leader, so 67 beds of statewide ABI, brain injury, neuro, spinal cord injury, you name it. And we're now 2.5 years down the belt of NDIS. So the things I'm talking to you about today are the things that we've learned. This is not what we started on day one by any stretch. It probably took us about 18 months to get to the stuff that I'm talking to you about today. And the only reason I know it works is because we tested and tried doing other stuff, and it didn't work, and we do this now, and it works. And while I haven't gotten direct feedback from the NDIA, I've put it under the noses of many, many, many of them, and they haven't said not to use it. So that's as good as it gets in the NDIS world as well. And my colleague Virginia here from the Summer Foundation, also an occupational therapist with lots of clinical experience, who's working at the Summer Foundation in this sort of health discharge space. So we are specifically talking about this health discharge interface. But it's transferable to everything. So everything to do with getting supports right through the NDIS is something people should be able to take away today. But the context, the way that we're framing it, is around people stuck in hospital who can't leave unless they have a funded NDIS package. So just by the nature of that, we're talking about people with very complex support needs. So quite severe disabilities and complex support needs. So we're talking the extreme end. So if you're looking at what we're talking about today and you're thinking, gee, this sounds full on, it might not be that full on for the type of patients you work with or the setting you work with, but the information is the same. You just might need 2% of it instead of 98% of it, like someone with a new complex disability needs. So just keep that in mind as we go. We're going to talk about what the discharge pathway is for people who are leaving hospital. We're going to talk about the role of each discipline and how to work as a team to achieve these outcomes. So there is no way a one-man band is going to get much at all done when it comes to hospital discharge and NDIS supports. This is a very much a large MDT team effort that it takes to get these people out of hospital. And the work is significant. It's much different than what we're used to, and it impacts what we do, but the outcomes that we see for patients are really, really, really positive, despite what you might hear on the news and in the media. So, this is the NDIS discharge pathway. 4 steps. Access, pre-planning, planning, and plan implementation. Again, it sounds simple, maybe, but you can't Google this. What are the steps? So we've made it up, and this is what we call them. We find this to be very, very important to have these things identified, labeled, and clearly defined, because it means that when we talk to our managers, when we talk to the patients, when we talk to the doctors, and we use one of these 4 labels, everybody knows what we're talking about. So when you say access, people know that you're trying to get an access request form, that you're trying to fill it out, that you're sending it back in, that you're waiting for the determination. That's what everybody understands access to be. So when the consultant says, have we done access yet? People can say yes, no, maybe, or we're waiting.
It's not registration, it's not referral, which might be some terms you might want to.
Yep. So access is really important. There is no better way to get the NDIS offside than to use the wrong language. Absolutely. If you say the word rehabilitation to them, it doesn't matter what support you're asking for, they won't pay for it. If you say referral, they don't want to be a part of that. This is all about choice and control from the participant, and it's all about access and initiation and voluntary engagement with services. So great point. Pre-planning. So pre-planning is a very, very, very important, perhaps the most significant step, and that's getting ready for the plan needs. So that's developing a 12-month plan for all the supports a person is going to need in order to leave hospital, stay in the community, and live there for the next 12 months. So quite a big piece of work. The significance about pre-planning is that it's basically discharge planning on steroids in a different language. So we have way more supports than ever to negotiate. So there's no caps with NDIS, there's no funding packages with NDIS. NDIS will fund whatever is reasonable and necessary and whatever the participant needs. So that means that we have people leaving hospital regularly with upwards of $200,000 worth of funding in their plans. We have people leaving hospital semi-regularly with upwards of $500,000 in their plans. And for people with high-level spinal cord injuries, they have plans of excess of $800,000. That's not expensive. It might sound a little shocking, but that's what it costs. That is according to the data and all our experience here on Earth, that's what it costs to set somebody up in the community for the first time after a new severe disability. So pre-planning is doing all of that work in the NDIS language. So figuring all that out, adding it up, putting together, and then translating it.
And I will just mention for our mental health guys, certainly some plans that I saw of people with complex needs who came in, even not a newly acquired mental health condition, but came in for a readmission and then set up with big plans if you're talking about very complex support needs in terms of behaviour support. So still the same.
When it comes to planning is the act of the planning meeting, so it's a 1 to 2 hour meeting. That's what it looks like generally nationally. In places like WA, like Perth, and in the regional areas, planning might actually take on a different form. So just like everything with the NDIS, you have to be prepared for it to change, and you have to be prepared for your local context to influence some of these things. So I'm providing the sort of generalist experience, what happens most of the time, but if you work in a regional area, or you work in an area that's going to have close contacts with their local NDIA offices, or local area coordinators, capitalize on those, your circumstances might then look very different around planning. But generally, someone shows up in a room for 1 to 2 hours, they sit there, and the expectation is that you put together this $500,000 plan in 1 to 2 hours. And for any of you who've been involved in complex discharge planning, you know that that's not humanly possible to do. That you can't clearly articulate those things, you can't explain them, you can't justify them, you can't put that together. So that's why that pre-planning work is so important, because all that needs to be done before the planning meeting. Then we have plan implementation. So that's when the plan lands on someone's lap or someone's inbox or someone's post letterbox. And it's got the money available immediately in it, which is fantastic, and the services then need to be purchased or implemented in order for discharge to be achieved or for any of the supports to be enacted. So that's plan implementation. Those are our 4 steps along the discharge pathway. I'm just going to check in with our folks checking in remotely, making sure everyone can hear. And if you do have a question, please just unmute and let us know if you have a question as we go. I can see you, so if you nod or give me a thumbs up, I'll know you can hear us, and there we go. Great. Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Good. All right. So in order to do this, we've developed a standardized approach. So we, meaning me and my colleagues over at NDIS and Health, but this has been developed in collaboration with some other, quite large metropolitan health services, and this approach is now being used as a key training model nationally. So we've rolled this out in New South Wales, South Australia, Tasmania, and some parts of Queensland, and health services there are sort of generally adopting this approach to getting ready for planning. When we first started with the NDIS, we weren't doing any of this, and I can't explain how little of this we were doing. We were showing up to planning meetings with our normal stuff, our normal care plans, a discharge summary, an equipment list, all of those sorts of things, and we kept coming away from the planning meetings and going, why is the plan totally not reflective of anything that this person needs? And it became aware to us over time that the way we were asking for things was not understandable to the NDIS. So quite literally, we were asking for things in English, and they needed things to be written in German in order to understand them. And then as soon as we started writing them in German, lo and behold, the plans would come back, and they were exactly reflective of what we were asking for. And when we go to meetings at high level of government and we talk with the NDIA and we say, you're not doing this, people are stuck in beds, it's terrible, it's this and that, they just look at us and go, you're not giving us the information we need. We can't possibly translate what you're telling us into what we need to make this happen. So we've got 2 sides of the coin here that are really traveling along to try to make it work. So our standard approach is these 2 documents. We've got a discipline guide, which we call the guide, so a discipline guide to hospital discharges, NDIS supports. That lists every single discipline that we could possibly think of, and what their role in each of those 4 steps of the discharge pathway is. Then we've got the tool, so the NDIS pre-planning tool. The tool is the money shot. The tool is the thing that makes things good. So if the tool is filled out, and look, if it's filled out really well, like if you do this 25 times over the next 2 years and you really get used to doing this, and you fill it out really well, the tool will take you all the way. It'll be the greatest thing that's ever happened to you and your patients. Even if you fill the tool out a little bit and quite poorly, it is still way better than not filling it out at all. So even if you're just listing a few things and you're like, oh, this planning meeting's happening and this patient's not going to get what they need and I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm just going to have a couple of goes and fill it in and I'm going to send it in, that will produce a better result than not doing it at all. So we'll just keep that in mind about how we go about using the tool. So the guide on pages 5 through 8 has a chart that looks like this, and all the disciplines are listed down the left-hand side with the 4 stages across. So this is just a quick reference guide. It's the type of thing that everybody should pull out and stick on the pinboard in the office, because when you're wondering why things aren't moving or what the social worker or the OT or the nurse should be doing, you can quickly look and say, oh, okay, this is the role of the team at this step. The discipline guide is set up so that every discipline can pull out their pages. So everything looks the same way. So this is the physiotherapy first page. It talks about the pathway. It has 1, 2, 3, 4 steps with the steps that they're involved in bolded, and then it'll go through and explain exactly what they need to do for each of those 4 steps. So the idea is that every discipline can pull out their section and share that with your teams, as opposed to just the whole 50-page document. But, you know, managers and team leaders and stuff will want that whole document so they can support the team to do the whole thing. The tool, we're going to go into extensive detail in the pre-planning section, so trust me that you'll get a gutful of that in a moment. We're going to talk quickly about access, because obviously you can't get to the point of planning unless you do access properly and actually obtain that access. There's some things about access. One is it's a paper form, and the only way to get that paper form is to either ring up the 1-800 number and request it, and they'll take some demographics. We were told by the NDIA yesterday, it's the first time I've heard it, that you can also email the National Access team and say you're from Health and get the form that way. So I'm cynical by nature, but I'm hopeful that is actually true and it'll work. So we're gonna email everybody around with those details, because that was a bit new to us. But anyway, they're gonna send you some paperwork, and it's gonna have a coding number on it. That coding number is really, really important and significant. If you send an access request form back that doesn't have that coding number on it, it's gonna end up in the wrong place, in the wrong hands, at the bottom of a pile, and your 21-day KPI for finding out if someone's eligibility will quickly blow out to 3 months. So our advice to everybody is don't take your chances, however tempting it might be, to fill out a blank access request form and just send it in. Go through the proper channels, get one sent to you, make sure it has that number on it, make sure it's filled out, and then you send it through.
And if you're in the community, sit with your client, bring up together, and get it sent to them.
If you have in the past, because I actually have got sent a blank form by NDIS at some point, so in the past, if you have done that, how do you follow up on that? How do you actually say?
Yeah, we have a team of social workers that quite literally gets to work every morning and spends like 2 hours just ringing the NDIS every morning.
So what does the coding number do?
Well, it tells them that they've heard about this person before, and it matches them in their system. They're also trying to somehow corral the access to NDIS nationally. So we're talking about hundreds and thousands of people who are trying to access this. They don't have the capacity or the funding to do everybody tomorrow at the same time. So when you do that, it gives them a register of when this was done, what the priority is, and how they're going to manage that when it finally gets back to them.
Because there will be some people that will be known to them. So those who, in your case, transitioned from NDIS WA, those who are defined clients, so have already been receiving state disability services. So they have a rollout system. So that it's like, in some ways, a little bit of a competition as to, and then if we may be able to have this system of an email that highlights that this is related to a hospital discharge, then they can correlate where best in that access the efforts need to go to, I guess. So they have a rollout system that they need to follow.
You found that you need consent to share information points.
Yes.
Absolutely, yes.
Yes,
So,
and you have to use theirs, don't you? Because we have them for our own health service, but you have to use an NDIA one.
do you mean a form?
Yeah, because we've had difficulty, because one of the workshops I went to with it, one of the head contracts in NDIA, he said you should ask for a consent form, NDIA consent form, when you apply for access. And when we've actually done that, the people at the other end of the access team have gone, no, we won't send you a consent form until we've decided they've got access. But then they won't talk to you.
Yeah, so we are calling the 1-800 number. We're not using an email. So our social work team does exactly what Virginia is explaining. And I should say at this point, in the discipline guide, we've nominated social workers to be the coordinator of access. So what they do is they sit with the participant or a family representative. If the person doesn't have family and isn't able to make their own decisions, that goes down a whole nother avenue of guardianship, which is NDIS is having an extremely large impact on the guardianship, waiting times, availability of guardians, all that throughout the country. But they'll sit there with whomever they can to represent the patient, if not themselves. They ring, they give the basic demographics, they ask right then and there for the health representative to be listed essentially as a next of kin or a primary contact person. The participant and their family member or representative then gives verbal permission to say, yes, I want you to communicate with this person on my behalf. I'm in hospital, I don't have capacity, blah, 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 blah. And that works fine for us. And then NDIA from that point on are very happy for that communication pathway to continue. I actually don't have any experience with a consent form around that as such. But you have to get that conversation in to make sure that people can be listed. And then it seems to go quite smoothly from there. So as I mentioned, the social work coordinates this. This sections A, B, C, D, E, and F of the access request form. Sections A through E are largely demographic information. The social worker fills that out with the participant, gets all the information in there. And then section F is really about the allied health or the multidisciplinary team completing that. We do recommend that when you send the access request form back, you send a cover letter or right on the top of it, priority access, this person's in hospital, if they actually are in hospital, or the subject line, if you're emailing it back, priority access, this person requires support to leave hospital, just as a way to flag to the NDIA that this is a unique instance. According to how the NDIA prioritizes access, people in hospital are actually considered the least priority because they're safe. So the NDIS prioritizes people who are maybe facing homelessness or severe risk in the community over people who are housed, and have a support team. We all know the irony in that, but I can certainly understand from their perspective that makes sense as to how they've chosen to prioritize. So here's the list of all the people involved in doing the access request form. So mostly we're talking about Section F, and the doctors do the diagnosis and sign it off. There is a lot of misconception around there about all these reports that are required for access. And really that's not true. The only thing that is required for access is the access request form. The trick is it has to be filled out properly in German, So if your team gets really good at doing that, articulating disability and the permanent insignificance of it in a way the NDIS understands, then the access request form is really all that's needed. Certainly if you have a really good allied health report, specifically for people who may be on the edge of access, those things are really helpful. We also send in the CAN, so the Care and Needs Assessment Scale, which is a one-page, really quick tick box thing that the OT does. It's a standardized assessment, and that goes in as well. So we're going to go through what this Section F looks like. Every box is set up just like this. So mobility, communication, social interaction, learning self-care, and self-management. The person that you're supporting with access does not need to have a permanent significant disability in all of these categories. They can just be in need of supports for one of these categories. So that's fine. Don't feel like you need to force information into all these boxes if it's not relevant. The NDIS pretty much, just almost, doesn't really care what's wrong with you. And we in health, and I see it all the time, we impose this on the NDIS more than it's actually true. They don't care if you have severe depression or a spinal cord injury, or MS, or schizophrenia. All they care about is that you have a permanent and significant disability, according to their definition of disability. You do have to have a diagnosis, of course, but that's just a really small part of it. So getting the language right in access means that you have to have a good understanding about what the NDIS thinks disability is and how they articulate that. So diagnosis, impairment, activity limitation, and participation. Those four things in a sentence make up what NDIS believes disability is. And we're going to go through that in a bit of detail.
Very happy. We'll be sending out these slides to people.
Yeah.
I know some people like to say like to write to kids alerting away, but don't really need to.
Yep. So if we were talking about diagnosis, of course, something like a stroke. So Jack has had a severe stroke, or Jack has been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, for example. And then we need to talk about the impairment, which has resulted in a permanent cognitive and communication impairment. And I'm totally going out on a limb here with some mental health examples because I know we've got some folks in the room. But for example, you might say that if Jack has paranoid schizophrenia, he has impairment in being able to interact with people. So he can't talk to people who he needs to talk to live in his community. Then we need to talk about the activity limitation. So someone has a stroke, they can't think or talk well, and so it means that they can't have conversations, can't do the things. So we're slowly building towards what that functional impairment is. And then we just want to talk about the participation. So what do they need to do? What do they want to do that they can't do now? When you get to this point in the explanation of disability, a light bulb goes off for the people at the NDIA and they go, oh, I understand how we can help now. I understand what's going on for this person and how we can engage with them to help. So in Jack's example, he needs some capacity building support so he can maintain his speech therapy gains so he can communicate with his kids, which is the participation thing that he can't do without the support from the NDIA. And there's a lot of keywords in there, so things like capacity building and things like maintain. That's the German language stuff that we have to get really well versed with so we can include in the access request form.
Rehabilitation is English, maintenance is German.
Yeah. There's a good chance someone just screams for the word rehabilitation and then just puts it in the file. All right, so we've talked about some tips. Medications are not required on the access request form. When we went around to the NDIA in every state and territory, they said, can you please just stop listing 53 medications on every access request form? We don't care. They also told us that of all the people that do access request forms, health does them the worst. We know we do them the best. Anybody could read them throughout the world and understand exactly what we mean, but in German it doesn't make sense, so that's okay. The other thing about access, and a big question that came up yesterday in the workshop that we did, is when to start it. And by and large, you want to have the word yesterday in your mind when it comes to this. However, there are definitely exceptions to that. What helps you make the decision about when to do this is getting to know what they mean by permanent and significant. So much like other systems, you don't need to know exactly how severely disabled this person will be a year from now. You just need to know, yes or no, are they likely to have a permanent disability for the rest of their lives. It doesn't matter how severe that is or how severe it's going to be. The NDIS is very happy for you to need a ton of supports tomorrow and not any at all in 2 years. That is perfectly okay.
I was just wondering if you could explain how, as a service, though, you discuss that or come up, like, I know the social worker is responsible for getting access requests from. Is that, like, is the social worker making that decision, or are you talking about it as a team? Like, how do you come to that point?
We talk about it in a team meeting, and again, just by the nature of the core group that we're discussing today, which is people who get stuck in hospital, these people on day one, you know who they are. They come to your ward and you're thinking there is no way they're going to be able to leave and go home without significant support. So those people should be an easy yes on day one. And what I would do is in the case conference or in the team meeting, have that discussion. Is this person likely to require some support for the rest of their life because of this disability? Doesn't matter how much or what kind, a yes or no question. If everybody around the table goes, yep, then you go.
So, for example, I work in neurology, and most of our patients would leave our ward here, our acute ward, and go to the state rehab service.
Yep.
Are you saying that we should be doing that from
No.
the setting?
So that's a great example of one of those questions.
Okay.
Yeah. You might get some people, and we can use our FIM scores. We talked about that yesterday, right? So someone comes in and they've got 1s for FIM. We know that those people are very, very unlikely to get to 7s. That's an evidence-based thing. We know that. Young, non-progressive neurological clients are an anomaly. They're an exception to that, because you know what someone can look like on day 2 on an acute stroke unit, and then on day 5, totally different. So we don't want to be doing access for those people. But when they get to rehab and on day 14, it starts to become quite clear that those FIMs are only going to get to a 3, then they would do it. The NDIA, I think they have some memos up about young neuro, and rightfully so. We don't want to be pushing the NDIS on these people if they're actually going to recover to a point that they don't need it. So in the hospital system I work at, we're almost solely doing access request forms when they get to rehab. We're not starting them in acute. That might be different for you guys here, so it's a good conversation to have in your teams. An example of when we do them in acute is for people with an amputation, and people with spinal cord injuries, so ASIA A and B spinal cord injuries, we do them for them because that's a sort of no-risk pathway. The NDIS knows that if they get one of those access requests on day 2, it's legit, whereas for a young stroke patient, they'll question that.
With the list A, like we didn't have the list A of conditions that are pretty much automatic in without other evidence under WA and NDIS. Do you write that if you have people, because like particularly in PEDS, the list is about 2 pages long.
Yes. So if your client has one of those diagnoses, it should be the first thing that you write in that box. And that's a great point. You need to write the disability that mostly impacts the person's function. So in healthcare, we do it the opposite. We write the condition that's most recent first. And what we see a lot happening is someone with progressive MS comes into hospital with a hip fracture, and the health team write hip fracture and not progressive MS, and then these people get knocked back, and that whole thing. So make sure you're writing that condition. If it's on the list, you write it right at the top. Certainly we are experiencing that those people go straight through without question.
Just one comment about on the list that there will be some conditions for some of them that you need further evidence and information. For example, brain injury and spinal's on the list, and you think, oh, that's exciting if you work in the world of brain injury, but you still definitely, their definition of brain injury actually relates to spinal injury. So you need to be defining that brain injury in terms of the functional impact.
Yeah. Where's the list? Where do you find the list?
It's on the NDIS website. Yeah. Can I make just a quick comment for psychosocial disability for access? Little trickier in the kind of that acute rehab phase of to evidence psychosocial disability. The NDIA want evidence that there has been some best practice treatment has occurred, because we know that treatment can occur and disability doesn't happen, because the treatment can actually not result in disability. So if there's evidence that treatment, best practice treatment has occurred, but there's still quite severe, moderate to severe functional impact, and it's looking likely to be lifelong, then go for it. But it's a little bit harder to evidence the psychosocial disability
across the nation, they're getting better at it, but just be aware that it is a really hard learning curve that you work, and your NGOs get good at it. So work with them, because they get good at working out, okay, they've been through some treatment period, and even though they're going to have highs and lows with their condition, there's evidence enough that this is looking quite significant.
No, I was going to say, could you use that like an example?
So if you think of quite severe anxiety and depression, okay, so the NDIS need to see that there's been significant amount of attempted treatment and best practice treatment, and yet there is still been ongoing quite significant, moderate to significant disability occurring that's likely to be lifelong. So this person has significant difficulty leaving their house and engaging in their everyday, significant difficulty in being able to maintain employment, be able to work, be able to study because of the effect of that anxiety and depression, the functional impact of that anxiety and depression.
And the NDIS, there's a lot, especially in early days, a lot of conflict around the mental health wellness model, and how, you couldn't find a degree of that reflected in much of the NDIS documentation. So it is important to know, as I was alluding to before, that the NDIS firmly believe in the wellness model, and they are very happy for people who have obtained access to have periods of wellness where they don't need support. But I guess the good news about that is once you're in with the NDIS, you're in. They're not going to kick you out. So if you do become unwell, you have an opportunity to reinstate your supports without having to prove your eligibility again. So I think that might be a positive thing. But
But in the evidence base, I know one of the adults who had a patient had COPD not back, and the NDIA said because you can have a lung transplant. And like we would go, we've never got a lung transplant. Do you know where they get there?
No. And a perfect example of this for me is the obesity argument. So at Austin Health we have a fantastic national obesity service there, and so the evidence around obesity is drilled into us, and we know that this is not a life choice. We know that these people have a different physiology and makeup, but I hear the NDIS talk all the time about how they just need to stop eating. This isn't a disability. So there's a long way to go around defining what is a health condition, what is a disability, what is an act of free will, and what is there's a long way to go in that. The advice that I give people is that we need to do our best to articulate the functional impairment and disability. What I really don't want to see health services do is not attempt access because you ring up and somebody tells you COPD and obesity don't count. That person may not be eligible, but we should try to get them if they have a functional impairment due to what's going on with them.
They must be collecting data, so at some point we're going to see treatment.
And there's also court cases coming out left, right, and center that are testing these things. The NDIS only has the Act to go by, so it's a long read, but I really recommend reading that, because if you do, it really puts your mind where their mind is, and it shows you that when the only thing you have is a big 250-page act to guide your decisions, it can be a game of semantics. It can be how you articulate things according to what their act says. The act doesn't list the conditions that are excluded. It doesn't.
Decision-making trees as well, because you can Google them. There's decision-making trees, and that enables you to work out how they think. Well, we use that a lot for our developmental.
Great, good questions. So we've got some information in these slides about this permanent and significant stuff. Really good to get familiar with it so that, again, you're not saying, ooh, is this permanent, is this significant? So as Virginia alluded to, no treatments that would be likely to remedy the impairment, does not require further medical treatment or review for the permanency to be demonstrated, can vary in intensity, so that's totally fine.
And the severity of its impact on the functional impact of a person may fluctuate or potentially improve. So you might get this is consistent across the country. You ring up the NDIA or they ring you back after doing an access request form and they say, oh, this person's in rehab, they don't qualify. That's not true. That's not true. So we just need to push back on those things, and I can't stress that enough. A lot of people at the NDIA do not have health or disability backgrounds, which is not their fault. They are growing exponentially. They have staff turnover. There's a good chance that this person might be hired a couple of days ago. Very true. Still going through training, and it's really important to politely and respectfully challenge some of those things that you hear that you think, hang on. This doesn't sound right to me. You know, if my team at every planning meeting they went took some new piece of totally left field advice from what the planner said, we'd be just running around like crazy. So we've gotten really good at having those conversations that say, the frame that we're working in is with this. If you have some documentation around that new totally out there thing you just said, you know, please send it through, you know.
You'll never receive it.
You'll never receive it.
Yeah.
No, and then that goes a really long way when you're trying to deal with big health teams that are trying to get the system and to do it. So
The other thing that we were told by the guys that were running the partners in the community on the East Coast and various areas was that if you get somebody who doesn't get in, you have two choices. You can appeal that decision or you can reapply. And if you reapply and change your language, it's actually much harder.
yeah, absolutely. And it's something, as a stat, I don't know the number exactly, but it's in the high 80s, if not 90s, about the people who get in on the second attempt. And absolutely, when I couldn't believe it when we were traveling around the country and every single state said the same thing to me. The language isn't right. We don't understand what you're saying. And so they would just knock it back.
Yeah.
Really, really good information in there.
Can I just ask one thing about the permanency with regards to people with amputations, for example, lower limb amputations? What about if the plan is for prosthetic limbs and gait training and
because the limb is an assistive technology that they need because of a permanent and significant disability. I have seen in writing that the NDIA on the automatic through list is a double amputation, so having 2 or 4 limbs amputated, and a single limb amputation you need to have some more justification, but they're all getting it, because they need support.
Remember health responsibility for rehab though, and your state may agree that they're supplying the first leg. To be very crude about it. And then after that, the ongoing prosthesis, if they meet eligibility. Remember, they've got to meet eligibility on moderate to severe functional impact, and that functional impact is likely to need lifelong support. If you have a well-functioning, high-functioning amputee, they may not meet that criteria. So, and they will just continue to get their prosthesis through the state funded.
Brynn, can I just also ask what your experience has been with that additional supporting evidence form that you get? So imagine you're sort of sitting at that top end where you probably don't, but there'll be scenarios where you do. I'm sort of struggling with advice to staff around whether you prepare that and send that with the access request. Or I've had some advice from NDIA, again, get different advice that send in the first one, NDIS will advise if you need that additional evidence and then come back, but then you've got a time delay, obviously.
We're struggling with that same thing. So when we found out that it was all around this language thing, we did all this education about the language. We added the CANs as our assessment tool, and then we were traveling well for about 6 months, all going through, and just of late, so the past 5 or 6 weeks, we've been getting a number of knockbacks. So I kind of wonder if maybe the dust is starting to settle a bit at Access. They might have done some more training with their staff at Access. All those things that might be internally going on that are meaning we have to adjust. So that question's actually really hard for me at the moment because we are now starting to think that we should be doing.
You were going to have an answer.
The thing my team is doing right now is the access request form and the CAN.
Okay, so, and you're waiting for advice, so they put in their application, NDIS come back and say, I need further evidence, and then you'll do the secondary, and you're not doing it up.
But that wasn't happening for us. We would just get, they were all just going through. So that's why we were doing it that way. And then, like I said, just recently, I've gotten a call from the girls that work on ABI saying, we just got 3 or 4 knocked back for more information, what's going on?
Do you think there's a point that you can pick, like, we talked about knowing someone's going to be out, is there kind of some advice on when you think
I
they
think
might need that additional
it's
evidence?
conditions more than anything else. I think that the education that the access team at NDIS are getting is around those young neuros, whether it's ABI or stroke or something, that if they can pull anything from that says they're too young, we don't know yet, they might improve, those are the people that they're knocking back. And look, part of me agrees with them. You know, we are obtaining access, we are pushing access because these people are stuck in hospital. You know, there's an ulterior motive here, big time, whereas I see where they're coming from in the sense that, hey, give this person at least 3 months before you make a call. So we might come up with a sort of functional performance and sort of send through, but we haven't, we're not ready to do that yet because it's a lot of work to do that.
So just going on that, in a community mental health setting, if we are looking after some clients that we've had for quite some time and they're not functioning, we want to refer them to NDIA. Would we do offer like a report and attach that to the access form to demonstrate what we have done and where the gaps are?
Yeah. And I know there's so much good work going on in the mental health space, so please don't take anything that I say today and like try to reinvent the wheel. Really go out there nationally, get online, Google, because there's people, the Hunter New England region, they did the mental health rollout trial site. They are just nailing it. They have beautiful resources. People have made performers for psychologists and psychiatrists to use. Like, there's a lot of really good stuff out there in that mental health space to do it. But yeah, that's basically what has to happen. There's definitely additional information that people with primary psychosocial disabilities need to put forward.
I'm going to send you 2 links, just a slide, write one up now, send you 2 links that are quite good around access to psychosocial, which will help. And just don't use the word referral, so you're supporting them to access. That's fine. It's a change.
There's so many people at my health network that hate me because they'll talk to me about NDIS and I'm just like, nope, you mean this. The people that put their hand up and complain about case managers, and I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. They don't have case managers.
That's why NDIA use the term referral.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. And do you know what the big thing is with referral is that the crux of the NDIS, the thing that makes it so good for these participants is that choice and control. The fact that they never need to go to anybody for a referral ever again. Like that's the big bit about it. You really want to build that understanding through the use of the language that says, you choose.
Yeah.
You know, it's no referral, you don't need me for that. You know, you choose what you want to do with these supports. These are some resources, and I've seen a lot of people have these in their hands, printed out. So these are some Summer Foundation resources, step-by-step how to fill out the access request form, the getting the language right tools, some really, really helpful tips in there about words to use, words not to use. So definitely have a look at those things, and there's some links in the slide. This is a mumbo-jumbo one, but spend some time with this. Get your head around it. This is about how to articulate health conditions, impairments, activity limitations, and participation. Gives you some really good examples about what that wording should look like. I try to tell the people in my team, I'll make it a bit bigger there so you can see it, that I go back to sort of year 4, learning grammar, end of sentence structure. So you're just taking the key words and just trying to put it in a sentence, and then you go, okay, I made them all fit. You know, that's the way to approach it and to articulate all of these things. So this is just to let you know that that's there. Sit down with your team, spend an hour just talking about access. Pull these resources out, get a highlighter, go through it. You know, we need to learn through osmosis and talking and that sort of thing.
Brynn, sorry, just another quick question. Do you have LACs in your area that are rolled out? So I just because it hasn't started here, and maybe just to explain what the involvement might be.
Yeah.
Again, it's a bit different because I think your pointy end kind of missed the LAC process, but maybe some of the softer applications.
Yeah, my experience in regional, we immerse ourselves with the LAC. So a couple of tips there, and we can talk about it a little bit later. When you get your local area coordinator partners, know them. Link with them. So any concerns around access, if you're working in the community and you have any concerns around access, I don't know, aid and suggest encouraging a person to be part of it, to attempt to access, you can go to an LAC, they can help with that. If you want someone who you're not working with, but they come to you, send them to their LAC to support them with the access process. And then once they get their plan, They will help them with the plan, develop the plan, and once they get their plan, they'll help them enact the plan. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but you may not work with a LAC if you're with hospitals and it goes straight to quite complex. The LAC is more for your community, those who don't have high complex needs. The access can be helped by the LAC, and the plan needing will happen with an LAC.
So these are people that are already pre-known to disability services?
No.
Same terminology that I can say.
If your partner has not been announced yet, who will be getting the job to do the statewide rollout of the LAC partners has not been announced in WA. In our experience, it's about 4 or 5 organisations who get distributed across the state. I don't know if you've got any tips we might be getting it.
No, I think it's the tender's been out and apparently the announcement is imminent. They're supposed to have started on the 1st of January, which isn't going to happen.
Will it be by geographical area? Like,
yes.
In this area you've got a detail LAC?
Yes. Yeah, okay. And it's really important to keep this all in mind because when the rollout comes, I mean, these people will be hired in the next, they're going to be on the job learning this for like a few weeks. Yeah. Before they're expected to do it, so it's important to keep in mind.
From your perspective.
Oh, I'm agreeing with Envy about everybody that has a relationship with their cleric. So certainly in regional areas, this is paramount. It is fantastic. It is just the best
to the hospital, have
morning tea, coffee, give them some free pens, whatever you need to do, because it is just great. So this is happening in Alice Springs, in regional New South Wales, parts of regional Victoria near the border, but in the big metro areas, we don't see the LACs, and in fact, we have had some of them show up, see what we're about to ask them to do, and turn on their heels and hightail it out of there and get someone from the NDIA to come down. So that space is going to evolve, over time as people get on and the NDIS goes. But in terms of the health service, the other thing I will enforce for people who are in hospital beds is that we need to take the lead with this work, because the time frames, the inpatient stuff is not the time frame that other people use. So while you might get sort of LACs or people that say, oh, I'll help with access, or support coordinators that say, oh, I'll come and help review planning, that's great. Take them on offer, especially in the start, but we need to drive that, because otherwise 4 weeks goes by and we don't know what's happening. So different experiences, but if you have an opportunity to capitalize and make some of the relationships, they are worth their weight. So that's really good. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to jump into pre-planning. Does anybody have any more questions about access before we move on? How about anybody online? Any questions about access? Yep.
Sort of related, but I'm just wondering how, as a service, you determined sort of everyone's role in that process.
Yeah.
Did you do that at unit level, or like across allied health departments?
So like how we wrote the discipline guide?
Yeah.
I just wrote it and said do this.
Okay.
Now it's rolled up. Now it's rolled up. You know what? And this is because I see health services all over the place trying to, they put their project lead in role and they start running focus groups. Nobody knows anything about this. So you're just getting people in a room and asking them what they think, but they don't understand. They have no context.
Yeah.
So what we did was I wrote that document and said, this is how we're going to start it. Every single word is up for negotiation.
Yeah.
But we've got to start somewhere to roll it through. And like I said, we didn't do this for the first 18 months. I was very happy for people to start to like figure it out, develop their systems. Didn't happen. So we just said, right, this is what we're doing. We got the big wigs in the hospital to come down and say, this is it. You've got to do it, because it's a lot of work. And people were like, ooh, this is my job. Ooh.
Yeah.
And it was tough. So we really needed to take that very top-down approach to say, this is a big change. It's very important. This is what you need to do. But you can adapt it and change it. What I tell people about the discipline guide is that it doesn't matter who does what. It's just you can't take out any of those steps. Yeah. So as long as you reallocate something to somebody, that's fine. And there's a lot of room to move stuff. So it's just what we decided to do.
Don't give it to the doctors to do.
Yeah, to do. Yeah. All right. So we're going to talk about pre-planning.
So we're talking about the pre-planning tool, and we talk about a pre-planning meeting. So getting everybody together once you've got the tool before the planning meeting, so that there's no surprises and everybody knows what they're doing. So if you have it with you, please feel free to pull it out. It's okay if you don't. We're going to put everything up here anyway. Does anybody else need a copy? I just printed off a few more in case anyone forgot to bring it.
Yeah.
We tried to set up these tools so that new staff, rotating staff, students can pick it up, spend some time reading it, and get a fair bit of information. It's just not a blank template. So there's a table of contents that goes through the purpose and the background and all of that, so that people who are learning it for the first time can really get their heads around things. So the purpose of the planning tool, as we've discussed, is to prepare for the planning meeting. The background is that we need to prepare well. If we don't prepare well, the outcome will not be great. And when you're dealing on razor's edge about the supports you need for discharge, if they don't come through and discharge can't happen, that's a big issue. So getting it right is really important. And the main point is that this puts all the supports in one place for the participant and the planner or the LAC, whoever you're working with. Now, this is the bit that I personally was in denial about for years, months, about asking health professionals to learn this and do this. And then, as I explained before, it became apparent that we just need to. We just need to learn German. We just need to figure out how to do this and do it well. And then it became even more important to me. It sort of dawned on me that apart from making sure discharge goes ahead, we need to learn and know this because the participants need to know this. This is a self-directed system. This is a system that no matter what your level of independence or autonomy in being able to engage with this scheme is, you have a right to use it to the best of your ability. And that means that if you can only understand part of your plan, if you can only understand what core supports are, and that gives you a little bit more choice and control to articulate and influence what your life is like, that is exactly what the NDIA meant. So it's not that some people can do it totally independently and that's great, and other people just can't learn anything about it and they need to just deal and everybody else tells them what to do. There's this massive spectrum where people can sit and have fantastic outcomes by being able to engage with the scheme at a higher degree of independence. So what I mean is we can't withhold this information about exactly what's in the NDI's pre-planning tool away from anybody. We have to give them the right to learn whatever they can learn about it so that they can, over time, engage with the scheme more and more independently and not come back to health services, not go to their GP, not depend on other people to do it. When they get the plan back, it looks like the pre-planning tool. The words are exactly the same. The pre-planning tool is the plan. I copied the plan. And what we see is that when we do it really well, they copy and paste it into the plan and just email it back to us. Sweet. But that means that in order for the patient to understand what their supports are, they have to understand the pre-planning tool. It's going to come back looking at them the same way. So that's why health teams really need to, encyclopedic knowledge of the NDIS and this stuff, because the only way our patients will get it is if we have it. Now, not everybody's going to learn it. Hospital, catastrophic injury, grief, and I'm not telling you to shove this down people's throats and say you need to learn it, but we need to change how we think in health and really start building capacity early for the people that have the ability to. All right, so the tool needs to be used in conjunction with the discipline guide, because the discipline guide tells people what they need to do in the tool. And it's recommended that you complete the tool with patients, with the participants. So as you're compiling it, and what I've told my OTs is that the first 15 minutes of every session, they should be bringing the tool and they should be going over how it's progressing and what's going in there, picking key things to start educating patients about. There's 3 categories. Let's go over what those 3 categories are, that sort of stuff, and just building it into their rehabilitation. Throughout the tool, there's help boxes everywhere. Those help boxes list examples, further resources, more explanation, and they're throughout the document, so they specifically refer to the bits that they're placed in. They're meant to be deleted before we hand this over to the NDIA. It's okay if you don't. It just makes us look a bit more remedial than we probably need to, but it's totally fine if you don't. And the NDIS is going to change over time. Your experience being in WA, being in regional areas is going to change, so you should adapt to this as you learn and go along. 12 months from now, if you're saying, the tool says I should do it this, but your experience is telling you that other things are happening, adjust the tool according to what your experience is telling you and what works. So, and that's just the nature of things, and that's how we use the tool as well. All right. So participant information on the first page. The first two boxes are just basic demographic stuff. Then at the bottom we have the proposed support coordinator details. So, support coordination, do people know what that is? Yes. So they coordinate supports basically. It is the thing that a lot of people call case management, but that's not really the function of it. For people in hospital, people with complex support needs, support coordination is paramount. It is essential, it is critical in pulling off plan implementation. Not everybody qualifies for support coordination. People that need support to leave hospital do qualify, just by the nature of that fact. So we can assume that they're going to get it funded, because we're going to ask for it in the tool. If you show up to the planning meeting and you don't have a support coordinator already nominated, the NDIS will issue you one, or the planner will issue you one. The problem with that is that the support coordination is a really new role. Again, that whole they might have been hired a week ago thing is a reality, very stark reality. And if the support coordinator isn't very, very affluent in their role and in disability, and in fact maybe specific types of disability, it can be really, really hard to pull off plan implementation. So what needs to happen in health, and what is happening in health, is that we're starting to build these networks of support coordinators who we know, who we trust, who are good communicators, who are building expertise in their role as support coordinator. We're listing them in the plan right on the first page, so that way we know that our participant is going to be using that support coordinator to leave hospital, and we're not going with a lottery system that might not end okay. Do you have a question?
So who are these, where do these support coordinators go?
Are they private
engaged at all with them,
Yeah.
any that are happening?
I've had one just recently for a complex patient who was in hospital. She's already with the NDIS, but she had a support coordinator who was great.
Just like with all supports that the NDIS funds, so the NDIS doesn't provide anything. It's a free market system. So the NDIS literally made up this role called support coordination. They typed out what it looks like, and they said to the free market system, start hiring these people. Call them support coordinators. So businesses are just doing that. Individuals are just doing that.
Is there any way to check someone's
Yeah, there is. Yeah. So you can search for registered providers on the NDIS website. You can go and look at support coordination, see who in your area is registered. So that's a great starting point. What I would suggest is that you go to some of those community-based disability providers who you know and love, who you've worked with for a really long time, and ask if they're registered for support coordination. Those are great starting points. What we do is then we keep an in-house list of our recommended support coordinators, so that way we're only suggesting these people or these companies to our patients to use. But it's taken us a very long time to build that up. So when you're just starting, go to the provider website, call the people you know that are out there, ask if they're registered, and then you just start working with these people and you start to get a feel for who you want to work with more.
Your local area coordinators will start to get a feel for support coordinators as well. So the idea is you might be just working with your patient might be just working with the local area coordinator, but most likely for more complex, they'll have a support coordination. But the first step might be a local area coordinator who go, this is too big, we need a support coordinator. So I found regionally, they started to get a bit of a list of support coordinators.
Realistically here, because we don't have them yet. We're the only holders of them. And I think it's just been whoever we've run into so far, and some have been better than others.
And share that information. So we get email whipped around all the time that says, just worked with this person, here's their contact details, they were fab, they've got a keen interest in acquired brain injury or a keen interest in psychosocial disability, and then we just keep using them from there.
But should it be the client that's choosing this person?
Absolutely. So great. So with everything that goes in the pre-planning tool, the client gets to choose everything. They get to choose their provider.
What happens realistically, specifically for people who are stuck in hospital, they go, oh my God, can you please just tell me who to use, you know? I can't go. But 2 or 3 years from now, on their 3rd or 4th plan, these people should now be able to go to the open market and say, right, am I buying a Ford or a Mercedes? What color do I want it to be? Who do I, you know, that's the idea of the NDIS. So what we do in health, in order to facilitate choice and control and not do referrals and not just tell people what to do, is typically what we do is we offer 3 or 4 things that they can choose from. So we might say, here's a list of support coordinators in your area. We've worked with all 3 of them. If you want my 2 cents, I would pick that one, but up to you. Let me know what you think. And we do that with everything, with physios, OTs, support workers, plan managers, you name it. Everything needs to be offered to patients in that context so that they can make choice and control. A lot of people in health are worried about strongly recommending due to some conflict of interest. There's nothing wrong with that as long as you or your health service is not profiting from that situation. So if your health service registers for OT, if you become a registered provider for OT, you can't give strong recommendations to use your health service as OT. But you can list 4 things that includes your health services OT and say, can you choose one, and you document really well on the file that that's what you've done. And that they've chosen that. Sure. And the reality is,
fits with what we already do anyway.
And I mean, you want to do things like, if someone needs speech, social work, physio, OT, dietetics, you don't want them going to 5 different private providers in your area. And there aren't going to be many people from several years that do all of those in-house. So you might just say, look, you've got a really complex thing going on. You want all your stuff in-house. There's one company in your area that does that. Just go with them. That's fine.
Brynn, just quickly, in terms of that support coordinator, you would have people that you're discharging out regionally, remotely. How are you dealing with that support coordination? Is it better for the support coordinator to be local and based where the client is going home to? And then do you possibly have some issues, which I know we have, there's actually not appropriate support coordination available in that community?
We definitely are experiencing that. And if I go back to 12, 18 months ago, there were a lot of support coordinators that were taking on people anywhere and doing a lot of remote-based support. So we had our Geelong trial site, so Geelong's about an hour outside of Melbourne, so there were support coordinators there who were really, really good, and they knew that there was a market opportunity in Melbourne, so they would start in-reaching and they would do stuff, and that was great. 12, 18 months on, we are going much more local because all the new services that have popped up in these regional communities and stuff, you have to have that local context to go to.
So that's a consideration for Metro if you're recommending that you need to be looking at, and maybe touching base with your local health teams around who you know, who's
in your area.
Support, and then the scenario of no support coordination.
A good one for the Metro babes who are doing great work and do it really well remotely. So keep that in mind too. And they can work with the local, once you have your LAC, they can work with the LAC who's going to start to know their community, because that's the LAC's job, to know the community. So don't just think they have to be local. It's great if they start to set up, but in that time lag, a good Metro who's been doing it for a while and knows their staff.
That's helpful. And we certainly, we get, we had a discharge recently. Someone was in the far northwest corner, on the South Australian border. We just didn't know anybody out there, so we just took the gamble. We let the NDIS find one and issue one. That's all we could do in that instance. So listing support coordination on that first page of the planning tool gives your client the best chance of getting someone who's going to be able to help them at the moment. So don't beat yourself up the first dozen times you do this. If you don't have your list of support coordinators, if you don't know anybody, that's fine. Take your gambles. Let them issue one. You'll slowly build up your references. So don't stress too much at the start. Plan management options. You need to know about these plan management options because every single one of the supports that you're going to write down with your participant, with your patient, needs to have a plan management option allocated to it. So this is how people manage the money that the NDIS is going to give them. Self-management is probably not a good idea for anybody on their first plan. Self-management means that you need to manage your NDIS plan like it's your own personal business.
So you need to keep your invoices, you need to be held accountable, you need a separate bank account, you have to be really fluent with using technology in the portal. And to be honest, with a new disability, you can't do this. Like your life is in such a state that adding this on top is a bit too much. Having said that, we have had some young people with spinal cord injuries who have said, that's okay, I'm going to try it anyway. And that's fine. They have the right to choose that. It doesn't mean self-management that they give you $300,000 in a bank account and you have 12 months to spend it. That's not what it looks like. It just means that you can choose providers who aren't registered. You can pay for something with your FPOS card and then get reimbursed because you know the money's already there and allocated to that. In general, the NDIS is not reimbursed, so please don't get that confused. Pay for it now and get the money later. Only people who self-manage can do that because they already have the funding there. And it just gives people a bit more flexibility. So if you imagine a young person with paraplegia who's into hand cycling and they know they're going to go out somewhere and they blow a tire or they row a cushion on their cycle, burst a cell, and they can just go into the shop or they can just order one and they can pay it and they know they have the money in there. They don't have to go through all this rigmarole to get the stuff that they need. So that's what self-management looks like. Again, not recommended for people on their first or second plan. Agency managed means that the NDIA manages the funds, which means it sits in the portal so that your service providers log on to the portal, you can log on to the portal, the service provider, so your care agency or your support worker agency will send you the monthly invoice and it comes up on your portal and you just click pay and then the money just pops over to their account. So it all just sits there and all the business interaction happens there. You have to have a pretty good knowledge of how to use a computer and all that sort of stuff. It's connected to your MyGov account, so you have to have all that, and it's a bit of work. The NDIA, if you ask them, will say that support coordinators can help with that. They're not giving out a ton of money for support coordination. In my opinion, you don't want your support coordinator clicking around on a portable portal for you. They can help you in much better ways than that. That leads us to plan management. So plan management is a line item in the plan all to itself that the NDIS will fund to provide a plan manager. And basically what this is an accountant who takes the funds in your NDIS plan and manages it for you. So they pay all your supports. They map it out over a 12-month period so that you can see how you're tracking on spending your money. So if you pop into hospital for 3 weeks for a health-related issue, your support worker money is starting to build up because you're not using it. They can show you that you now banked $5,000 for that. How do you want to redisperse it or don't you, that sort of thing. So what we are recommending now for people who are leaving hospital, who are on their first plans, is that they use plan management. Just like support coordination, you have to go and find who's registered for plan management. Get to know them, get to love them, invite them around for coffee, they become good ones, they come to your meetings, they help you do all this, they get discharged off the ground.
What types of places do these people come from?
Yeah, great question. It was really fascinating to watch this evolve over the past 2.5 years. But originally, the disability people out there were doing it. They were just registering for plan management, and it was not going well. We weren't recommending plan management because it just meant that people were sending invoices to the plan manager, and they were waiting for months and months to get paid, and you couldn't get responses. 2.5 years on, accounting firms have switched on to this, and they're registering, and they are brilliant. The stuff that they're advertising, come to us, we've got an app, we've got a portal, we've got a thing that you can we'll send you every month that just plans it out, that sort of thing, which is fantastic. It's been really good.
And sorry, for the first two options, is that including someone like your spouse or your parent doing it for you?
Yeah. A lot of parents choose to self-manage. Absolutely, they choose to self-manage. There's a great thing around self-management for support workers with people with unique or specific needs. So if it's an issue you experience, which a lot of people experience, behaviors of concern about a revolving door of support workers, really needing that consistency, really needing specific people, parents or family members might choose to self-manage so that they can pay somebody a little bit more, so that they can adjust their work conditions in a way that a big support worker agency might not enable them to do, so that they can retain these staff and get the support that they need. So there's a real advantage in that to do.
Just a thing that came up yesterday with plan management. I think people were, there was a couple of questions that came through. So this idea, well, if you get plan management, that's less money you're going to get for other things. it's not a competition. So if there's enough evidence and it's related to a person's goals as to why plan management is required, it's not the expense. If you don't get it, the expense of something else. That's right.
Yeah. No, and I joke, but the way I talk about this is everything has its own box, right? So we go a few pages ahead. This is what the plan looks like. Everything has its box. All 15 of those supports, which we're going to get to, have their own box. Plan management has its own box. Nothing else can go in that box. So if you see plan management and money, that's the only thing it can be useful because it's in the plan management box. It's not going to take it away from equipment or care or anything like that.
What makes you ineligible for plan management?
That's a great question. And the NDIA, that's right. The NDIA would kill me if they ever get a hold of these things. But, and I'm not lying, it's true, in the Act, it's written that when someone requests plan management, they have to be offered it. The non-negotiable if they ask for it. Again, it's one of those things that when you say that to a planner, they'll tell you categorically that's not true. And then we have the Act printed out, that page of it, and we just hand it to them, and then it's fine. Yes.
If somebody's on an admin order or doesn't manage their own finances.
Yeah, I believe in those situations they're funded with plan management and then they do that. A lot of people that we have that have guardians have plan managers that the guardian selects and then the guardian works with them. Yep.
And you have a plan manager and you have a support.
Yeah, separate things.
Separate.
Yeah, but I'll tell you what's beautiful is when they work for the same company.
Yeah.
Oh. When a client chooses a support coordinator and plan manager, and they've got a $500,000 plan, and we sit there before discharge, and they just chat and work the whole thing out, and you're just going, oh, this is fabulous, it's great. That'll take years to happen. It's not going to happen tomorrow. It'll take years to happen. All right, participant statement. So I think we're on page maybe 3 or something of the plan now. The participant statement is exactly what the participant statement looks like in the plan they're going to get back from the NDIA. This is the conversation that the planner or the LAC is going to have in the planning meeting. They're going to ask the participant these questions. The reason this is really important to think about and discuss with the participant before the meeting is because they ask, tell me about how things are going for you now. What supports do you need? And when someone's in hospital, they're going to go, nothing. I'm fine. Nurses come whenever I want. I got a call buzzer. Look at this schwank wheelchair. And then the planner goes, oh, okay, they don't need anything. What we need to support patients to do is discuss what the supports that they're going to need when they're in the community. So they need to be prepared and practice the conversation that says, look, before this happened to me, this is how I was living. This is what my life was like. This is what I was doing. Now, I'm very well supported in hospital, but I need to go home. And when I go home, or wherever it is they're going, these are the things that I need. So in the grand scheme of things, I need a lot. So that's what this participant statement is about, getting people to be able to tell their story in that context, so they don't cut themselves off from getting the supports they need by just being like, oh yeah, I'm fine, I'm great. Which happens. And then you're the health representative in the meeting and you just want to jump in so bad and you're just like, oh my God, you're so not fine. Okay, next section is goals, and we touched on this with the people that were there yesterday. The NDIS, the way the system works, the supports that they fund need to be directly related to the goals that the patient states. Which means, if they go and they say the goal is, I want to buy this really, really specific piece of equipment, and the second goal is I want to be able to make my own meals, and they need continence supplies and support workers to get out of bed and a wheelchair and all that. The NDIS won't be able to fund all of those things because their goals don't relate to those things. Does that make sense? We have to be able to tie the goals that the patient states and all the supports that they need together. So, for people leaving hospital, for people setting up their lives for the first time with a new disability, that means that these goals need to be as overarching as possible. They need to be things like, I want to return home and live in the community and do all the things I want and need to do. Yeah, everything's tied into that. We are playing a bit of a semantics game with them, but it's really, really important. Fast forward 3 or 4 years down the line, people might be able to have one really specific goal about getting their equipment, serviced and maintained for the year and getting their new hand cycle because their other one's 15 years old. That might be fine for people 5 years down the track. But for people leaving hospital, we need to make sure these goals are nice and overarching. So there's 2 goals. Again, 2 because that's the amount of boxes they have in the computer system. So we have to put 2 goals there. Long-term goals and aspirations, you can have as many of those as you want. And it's really, really important that patients or the people you're supporting learn to set long-term goals and aspirations. Some of the really strong feedback that came from the early days of the NDIS is that people with permanent disabilities had been so restricted in choice and control and about the life that they could live that they weren't actually able to engage with the NDIS because they couldn't think beyond getting off the toilet in the morning. So it is our job to make sure from day one we're clear with people that the NDIS is not about getting off the toilet in the morning. It might be when you're leaving hospital, that might be what we're focused on, but for your next plan and the plan after that and for your life in general, you need to be thinking big. You need to be thinking about return to work, about social participation, about travel, about parenting, about whatever it might be. You need to be thinking much, much bigger than that because we don't want the NDIS and we don't want people on the NDIS to just be getting on and off the toilet. They need to do that, and then they need to go and live a life that's better for them. So those goals and aspirations conversations are really important to start to have early on.
Do you think that's really overwhelming to people who have a newly acquired disability?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. However, evidence suggests the otherwise, too. So in the spinal cord injury world, talking about return to work from the acute setting usually makes people feel quite relieved. They're usually worrying about, oh my God, am I ever going to be able to work again? And when someone shows up and says, let's talk about your return to work, we're not talking about the wheelchair you're going to use or the fact, but we're going to say, we expect that you're going to return to work and let's start talking about that. So in some instances, yes, but in most instances, people want that very early on.
How do you find that conversation with people who are severely cognitively impaired?
Yeah. This is going to really challenge us in a new world because even people with cognitive impairment can get a lot of support to return to work. And of course, may not be able to return to be a barrister like they used to, but it's going to challenge us to use supports cleverly so that people can engage with the workforce no matter where they're at. Do they need a support worker with them to make sure they get on the right train, to make sure they do it? What are the activities they can do at work to have gainful employment, to do things that might not have been their exact role? So it's about making sure people understand that if that's their goal, then the supports are there to help them achieve it.
I think one thing to really keep in mind is it's an insurance model. Okay, so an insurance model is set up that the amount of support the person needs will reduce because they will start to achieve more economic and social participation. That's how an insurance model works. So we've been entrenched in a social disability model that may be more about supports. So I think we need to shift a little bit to think a little bit like them, that around okay, so what's required to move towards someone being socially participating, someone participating in something that will have an economic gain, whether that be study, whether that be work, whether that be parenting. They're all economic gains because a person will hopefully reduce the supports they need by getting those economic gains.
Well, we know that produces health and well-being and decrease, rates of depression and pain. There's a massive cost.
There's a reason why they're doing this.
Yeah. It was all the stuff that they told us in OT school, and then we started working, and we were like, they were lying. They were lying. It's coming back full circle. We're just like, oh, people are going to be able to participate in occupations and receive all these benefits from it. Do you have a question?
Yeah, when you're talking about current goals with children and early intervention, if you're sort of overarching as I want to be able to reach my full potential as a child and my parents have capacity to look after me, is it good to speak in the voice of the child, but obviously lots of these are really premature babies and you actually have no idea how they're going to turn out.
Yeah, I actually have no idea. I can answer that question. So remembering that for you're in the 0 to 7 early intervention.
Yeah.
So the ECEI, you'll be able to if that organisation who's doing the assessment can evidence that you've got enough functional impact that you meet the eligibility for NDIS, you will get on access to the NDIS based on fairly early kind of simple goals, which might be as simple as
I want to go live with my family,
yeah,
that kind of thing.
Yeah. And then as the child starts to move closer towards 7, and then when they reach that point of 7, that's a point where they go, okay, do you have significant enough impact and likely to have lifelong impact that you reach the eligibility for NDIS? And that's when your goals will start to be a little bit more related to definitely to the child. Or no, there's not enough, and they will move out of ECEI. They won't be an NDIS participant. They'll be managed within mainstream. So this is how the ECEI pathway, and I'm happy to talk more about that because I did support my local health district around the ECEI, but it is a little bit different language for ECEI because they have their set assessments that will meet eligibility for the ECEI process. So I'm not quite sure when you have a neonate whether do they get automatic eligibility for NDIS or do they still stick with ECEI? Looking to raise that answer.
What we found is even our little ones that have a disability to go in under the ECEI. Well, they don't have ECEI here till January, but they go in the developmental delay pathway, so they don't tend to go into the full scheme. We find they tend to get the same support that
they are.
They come January when they have the early intervention partners. We might start to see things slightly differently, and we're still working on those pathways at the moment. But we even our kids with significant disabilities, often we get it back and they've come in under the developmental pathway, not under a disability or access pathway.
Yeah, so we'll do that develop. But I think the short answer is they will still want the language of the participant, and the participant, even in an ECEI, may still be that 1 month old. So,
that's what we have been doing in trialling, and I'm about to do another one for a baby, and it's just slightly, I think I've been definitely too focused from the point of view of the parent. If we flip it round, the child wanting to be at home with their parent.
Exactly.
It might help.
Good. Great. So this is just an example of the help box for goals. So this is a thing you can read and gives you some examples and then you delete before you go. The next page is around informal and mainstream support. These are really, really important because we can't just rock up to the planning meeting and say, hey, NDIS, you pay for everything. So we're showing them what the entire group of supports that are supporting this person is. So informal supports are things like spouses, parents, neighbors, loved ones, anybody around that might be an informal support to that person. Here you're going to write the description of the support, who they are, and any comments around it. This is important because the NDIS is going to want to see that where possible informal supports are used before formal supports. Formal supports meaning supports that they pay for, informal supports being free supports because you have relationships with these people. It conversely is helpful if you're dealing with a younger family where maybe both parents are working or a spouse is still working, and yes, there are 5 other adults that live in that home, but for very valid reasons, they can't be the primary carer for this person. So it's important to make sure that you're articulating that in there, and like all things with insurance schemes, you're not giving them any space to wonder themselves. You're stating it in there that yes, there are 5 adults that live in this house, this is what they do, this is their capacity to offer support, this is what they can't do. So that's why that's important. Mainstream supports are things that are like health support, so outpatient appointments,
any community rehab programs that are funded by health, GPs, maybe any NGOs that might be offering support groups or free transportation to stuff. You want to list all that in there under the mainstream supports. Again, so NDIS can see that everybody's doing their part to support the person.
Can I just ask something, sorry?
Mm-hmm.
When someone is, for example, in the hospital system is discharged before you really get to this pre-planning stage, or I'm even thinking if an ACAT has a referral to go see someone younger and, you know, might due to age stuff, and then who does all this?
Great question. Unfortunately, nobody. And what happens is these people get really, really bad plans. And then what happens is they show up in ED, and they sit on acute wards, and the acute staff then have to do this and initiate a plan review. That's what happens. This is so important that what we've done in our health service is say that, and this isn't everybody, because there are people that are going to travel in and out of health, like they always have, that may be NDIS eligible, but that health doesn't need to become involved in that for them. The people who are likely to be in need of health supports lifelong, and they have complex and permanent disabilities, and they come to our inpatient wards, even if they can be discharged without their NDIS plan, we still do the pre-planning tool for them, with them. Because we know that if they show up with that, even if it's a bit out of date, even if it doesn't, you know, completely reflect what they need, we know that that's better than them just showing up and having a chat. So the stories that come out of this, they sound unbelievable, but they're not. People with motor neuron disease who end up with $400 for a new wheelchair for a 12-month plan. It happens. You know, in the eastern states, people were getting cold calls. Someone was calling them, and they were engaging in planning on the phone and had no idea that's what they were doing. And then plans were just getting posted out to them, and there you go. So the reality is, without extensive support around planning, it's not going to go well. And again, if you're living in the community, if you have an intellectual disability and you're living in the community with your parents, and you can sit down, you can have a chat, and all you need is community access support and money to go to a group, and you know, those conversations might go okay, and the plan might come out like you want. But someone with complex support needs extensive support to get their planning right. The NDIS knows that. They know that they're screwing it up.
I think about health responsibility, and I think the message is whatever touch points you might have with a patient or a client in your community, ask the question, have you thought about access? Have you done any planning, pre-planning for a planning meeting? And I think clinicians go, oh, that is someone else's job. And I've worked with community nurses where I've gone, it is your job. Yeah, you go in for wound care twice a week, but you are the only person who may be working and doing good, that could possibly do good pre-planning for their planning meeting that's coming up in a month. You could be the difference between them getting a really bad plan or a plan that's going to meet their needs.
Did you get pushback from your health service in terms of keeping these people in hospital to do that now?
No, and we don't keep them in hospital to do that. The other thing is, you know, 2.5 years on, a lot of the OTs that coordinate the pre-planning, they can sit down and in 20 minutes throw one together for a patient. Again, if they don't need it to leave hospital, there's something implied there that, yes, they need a lot of supports, but it's not as, you don't need to be as specific and as, you know, you don't need to get it 110% right. So they'll just put it together and they'll just be like, I know that this amputee is going to need a wheelchair, I know they're going to need some community access, they're going to need an OT driving assessment, mods for their thing, and they just put that plan together and go, when you go to the planning meeting, give this to them. You know, make sure you give it to them. Also, in order to facilitate discharge, all the OTs in my team have permission to go to planning meetings after discharge if they need to. So if we're saying, okay, a young person who might go to a nursing home, for example, who then has realistic goals to get out of that nursing home, we don't want them to wait in hospital for planning. So what we'll do is we'll do the NDIS pre-planning tool, we'll stay in touch with that participant, and we'll go into the nursing home with them and sit through the planning meeting and make sure that that gets pulled through, because we know that if they cold turkey a planning meeting in a nursing home, they'll be there for 5 years. They're just not going to get out. So things like that we're doing to just to be adaptable. And you know, we don't, it's really hard to pull this data, but we can see it kind of happening anecdotally. You know, people with progressive MS who are frequent flyers in the health service, you know, their functional need decline, and then all of a sudden they pop into ED, they're on an acute ward, you know.
Yeah.
We're starting to see those people leave hospital with $250,000, $300,000 plans. They're getting their bathroom mods done, they're getting their equipment finally, they're getting the support that they need. And we're starting to think, well, what is going to bring this person back to hospital?
Yeah.
Possibly just a health condition, you know, they catheter, something goes on with that, or, you know, but they're not going to come in because they don't have care.
Yeah.
So us investing in that is critical. Very tricky conversation with hospital executives because it's hard for us to demonstrate that. But we are seeing, you know, that's happening. So we absolutely don't want people staying in hospital for this. But if you can, you know, 2 years from now, once you get good at this, if you can see that and just be like, oh, let me throw together a tool for him. Like, I know that's just going to...
And then you would give someone this.
Yeah. We'll also give it to our community rehab partners. So when you know, the health service offers community rehab in a lot of instances, we'll in our referral to them, that is a referral, we'll say, we started the pre-planning tool, they've got a copy of it. Can you go over that with them? Can you go over that with them before their planning meeting, make sure it's accurate, that sort of thing. And what you'll end up seeing is that
the complex care team here, ACT, could even then begin that conversation with someone in hospital and then pass it on to Connect or whoever.
Great. You're going to see NGOs start popping up all over the place who do this as well. So if you Google things like the MS Society or, you know, you name it, they're all going to have different types of pre-planning tools. Some are really broad, some are really specific. The pediatric space is full of them. Things to help people get ready for planning. And again, ours is so specific and detailed because we're specifically looking at that hospital discharge. You know, we just can't miss stuff. But in general, there'll be a lot of tools that sort of pop up over time. That's just a help box. Okay. What time are we breaking?
You haven't really decided, so people might be starting to do
I think so. We're about to get into some really gutsy stuff, as if we haven't already been there. So maybe we'll take a 10, 15-minute break. We do have a lot to go through, so we won't spend much more time, but come back in about 10 or 15.
If you want real coffee, or like the board this morning, there is a coffee shop just across the road, the other side of the coffee code, just the coffee, if you want to go grab a real
We don't use our apps like people from Boston say car. Yeah, people from California say car. Yeah. Sorry, I'll be back. Alright, so there's 3 we need to
Oh, You'll get your partner January.
I'm just gonna Google some stuff with you because it's really and then you'll have these processes.
So what will happen now? We'll have another step.
Yeah.
So rather than going to
So the moral of the story is NDIA is a nice paper, but in most states, in digital health, there are a couple of states who went different ways that never found. So what they do in those states is that they put into planning tools all of their information. They just come to the health center and start doing well, yeah, but the NDIA the problem is a lot of there are experts. But the whole side is make sure and what's happening is getting there, and then we'll get all out that. So the whole thing is but I'll have one more check. Is it WA might be negotiating a little bit. And then just wait to your hospital to make a decision about how they're going to go about it. Modify it however you want, absolutely, yeah, we just ask that people put it like adapted from off the health records, that's all. But yeah, do whatever you need, make it work for your credit. Again, the key is don't take anything out, just make sure that, it's all in there, but who does it. You're very welcome. Oh, really great. Real milk, like
When they get into NDIA, they know we want to have
That's what we were trying to get on in the end. Like, I think even though I've been fortunate to not at all, but the part of the triage, and that is in the moment,
I'm based in the city. Just bring up, right, I'd like to, we're out now, it's pretty Darwin, read it differently and I would. Yeah. I mean, these are
it's more work than
the people will stay there because their money's with them, when I discharge. Yeah, it's amazing. That's a great great plans, they probably part of getting training and government to go back and but now you're going to very fine, national for
Sorry guys, we should have put you on mute. Alright, everybody can grab their seats, we'll get going again. Driving home the last hour a bit.
NDIS pre-planning tool, which is where we document all the supports in German. Yes. Does anybody speak German? Has anybody been offended by me using German? Use like Russian or Spanish? I actually got that from New South Wales. We were doing, the full day workshop that we did yesterday. We did it in New South Wales, and there was so much animosity in the room. There was like 200 people there, and it was massive lecture theatre that went up like that. And I was standing down the bottom, and people were so angry. They were so angry about having to do this work. They were shouting at me. And the minute one of the guys from the Ministry of Health was here, and he stood up and he gave this German example, and you could kind of see the audience start to go, well, I don't like it, but I understand it a bit more now. So I've stolen the example from him, but I think it works. So we just call this section of the NDIS pre-planning tool the support plan template, because the NDIS plan is called the support plan. So by support plan template, we're sort of indicating that we're building the support plan from that. Some people find it confusing, some people don't. All right, so this is the structure of the support plan template. So on the left here, we have 3 support categories: core, capital, and capacity building. If you are going to regularly be supporting people with their pre-planning work, especially to get out of hospital, you need to eventually be able to, right off the top of your head, explain in detail what core supports are, what capital supports are, and be able to list all the capacity building supports. So wherever you are now in this process, and how familiar or unfamiliar these words are to you are totally fine, but just know that if you're going to be doing this work regularly, especially to support people leaving hospital, you need to know and love and be able to speak this language and understand what those things are. So it's okay if you don't now, but you'll have to get there. Don't forget, when your client gets their support plan back, it's going to say core supports and then more words that they don't recognize. So if you don't understand it, they're not going to understand it. They get the plan back, they've got no idea what it is or how to use it. So it's all part of this bigger picture. Core supports are divided up into 4 categories, as are capital divided into 2 categories, and then capacity building divided into 9 categories. And we're going to go through what those are. I've listed some of the primary disciplines on the side there that take the lead in those areas. Again, that's just a generic representation of what that might look like. You'll see that the support plan template help box is like 1.5 pages long. And it'll go through and explain this in detail. So when you do get new staff or students or junior staff, just sit them with this, let them read it, click in the links, and get the information that they need. Language is very, 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 very important. As we know, we're speaking German throughout this whole document. Plan management options are very important. The self-management, plan management, agency management. All 15 of those categories have to be nominated individually. But in the electronic version of that, there's a drop-down box, so you just click it and you just pick one of the 3. Hopefully your clients all choose plan management and you just click that all the way down, and that's okay. But plan management options are a really important part of this. This just shows you how the template is set up. So when I was talking about the boxes before, everything has its own box. This is the structure of the box. So support category, the name of the support, so this is just as an example, this is the coordination of supports box. So this is one of the capacity building supports, one of the 9 capacity building supports is support coordination. Has its own box, and in the gray it tells you a brief explanation of what that support is. Delete that when you send it off to NDIA, when you give it to the NDIA planner, delete that explanation. Not a big deal, but it's just there for you. Nobody else needs it. Then we've got the goals. One of those 2 goals that you set on one of the first pages of this document with your participant needs to go in that box. So you're copying and pasting one of those 2 goals into each of these boxes. So that way the NDIA planner or the LAC can clearly see how that goal ties in with that support. A description of support. You're explaining what the support is to that person. And again, depending on where you work, you might be able to come up with a very generic support explanation that you just copy and paste. every time you use it. Or you develop a better template that has more stuff in it, and it just stays there. So you're saying the person needs coordination of supports, this is what the supports are going to do for them, it's going to help coordinate the supports. Very generic conversation in writing about what that support is and why the person needs it. Then we have the clinical justification. That is the reasonable and necessary criteria. So we are saying, this is the support, this is how it attaches to the goal, this is how the person is going to use the support, this is how it's reasonable and necessary. We need to spell out to the NDIA, beyond all reasonable doubt, that this support definitely is reasonable and necessary. And again, back to 4th grade grammar, you're just pulling out the reasonable and necessary criteria and making a sentence out of each of them. We'll go into that in more detail. We have prescriber, qualifications, date, and then I don't have it here, but in every one there'll be the plan management option, and then there's the drop down. So, again, we're going to go through these in a bit more detail, but just so people know what the NDIA's reasonable and necessary criteria are, this is that. So it has to be related to the person's disability, not a health condition. What that looks like is, this support is related to the person's disability because, right? It must assist the participant to achieve goals in their participant statement. So this support helps the participant achieve their goals by facilitate social and economic participation, represent value for money. Value for money means that more expensive things and cheaper things have been considered, and there's a reason why this type of support has been offered, and it is value for money. So the easiest example of this is equipment prescription. You know, so you've got the $45,000 wheelchairs that climb stairs, and then you've got the $3,000 ones that nobody wants to sit in, and you're sort of explaining why you're at where you're at. Be considered good practice and likely to be of benefit to the patient or participant. We understand this in health to be evidence-based practice. So we're not recommending things that have evidence against their effectiveness or conversely things that have high evidence. It must be unreasonable for families, carers, networks in the community to provide. So again, that comes into the support worker space and in those core supports. So like why can't the 5 adults that live in the house necessarily provide those things? And it can't be the responsibility of any other government sector, so the education system, judicial system, housing system, or health system to fund. So being able to state that. Great. So we're going to go through each of the sections now so that everybody starts to build an understanding of what these look like and starts to get used to the language. So the core supports are made up of the 4 categories, which we'll go through, and they enable the participant to complete activities of daily living. So if the person wants to draw things together, core, the basics, right? The basic supports. This is where your transport, your support workers, your continence, your consumables, your community access is, right? So this is where the NDIS is saying, this is your on and off the toilet space. As we travel down, we're getting into that bigger, more participation space. The core supports are flexible. They're the only thing in the plan that is flexible, which means that when you get the core supports box back, it's going to have each of those 4 boxes, and it's going to have a budget listed in each of them. Really, all of those budgets can be mushed together and used however they need to be. This is important. If we go back to that scenario about the people who have no help with planning in the community, and it doesn't go well, and they pop back into an acute ward. What health staff are needing to do in this space is say 2 things. 1, do you have an NDIS plan and can I see it? 2, do you have a support coordinator? It's very likely that they're not going to have a support coordinator, so we take that off the table, and now it's just you and their plan. And discharge and 50 people in suits above you telling you to do it yesterday. The core supports are really critical in understanding how they work so that you can facilitate discharge. For example, if someone needs twice as much support as they did from support workers. So now they need help in the morning and the night, and their partners had to go back to work and they needed Saturday support now too, and they need this to leave hospital. They can't leave unless they get it. You can go into their core supports once you see the plan and you can say, all right, they've got $12,000 there. I'm going to go to the price guide and I'm going to map out how far $12,000 will get them based on the care that they need. So 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours at night, and all day Saturday, and you do the math, and you goes, right, if we use some of their continence money, some of their transport money, their community access money, we push it all together, we can get them out of the hospital safely for 4 months. Move all their money forward and use it. 4 months they get out of hospital. What that gives everybody time to do is initiate a plan review, so that their plan can then be beefed up or changed, whatever it might be, so that way they can actually stay in the community for 12 months. Now, that gets the person out of hospital, not sitting on an acute ward, for at least 4 months. And there's a lot of things that can happen from that point. If things go really well, they get the plan review, they get the money they need, and they stay home. That's great. Even if that doesn't happen, the plan review takes too long, they run out of money, they bounce back into the hospital, that's still 4 months that they weren't in hospital, and we're no worse off than we were on day one. Does that make sense? So that's the kind of creative use of the core supports that are required, and what I'm seeing more and more and more of health teams having to do in order to negotiate that. Yeah? If you've got a plan manager, they can just do that for you.
And your local area coordinator, can you have a support coordinator can help you with that? I mean, obviously the goal, we want to move towards getting a support coordinator as soon as the plan review comes about.
Yeah.
But
if they're willing to come into your hospital. Yeah. Good. So that's core support. Now, sorry? I've tried to beg a cheap deal. We even did this thing where we offered this massive training package to our LACs, where we said, we're going to do 4-hour workshops on ABI and spinal cord injury, continence. Come on, we're going to teach you for free.
Can I ask a question? How will you actually find out how much money someone's got left? Like the
You've got to see the plan. You've got to ask them for the plan.
But wouldn't that detect how much they get for the whole year?
Oh, yeah, potentially. But online you'll see what's left.
So patient has to be able to log into their...
Yep, and print out their plan or log in front of you and get it.
Or log into MyGov, is that what they do?
And it's logging into the NDIS portal.
Yeah. They've got a plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Everyone.
It's a huge challenge. There are plenty of people sitting on acute wards where the staff are just going, we can't get the plan.
Yeah.
No, I've got no idea.
And there's no central place to see it other than that.
No.
You're not allowed to.
This has been fed back there. They will not shift on this.
No.
Yeah. It's choice and control.
Yep.
Doesn't work for psychosocial disability.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's works for a whole...
Spot on. Yep. Totally. Yeah. And they know this and jump on those bandwagons, for all those good groups out there that are fighting this fight and escalating these issues, because there are things that need to change for sure. So in the boxes, they'll have yellow stars on the corner of the ones that are most commonly needed. So that's really helpful when you first start doing this. If someone needs to be discharged, you can look and say, oh, there's a box with a yellow star on it. I should probably think about what that is and fill it out. So the core support looks like this. So I just explained what the box is like, and you write what the core supports are. So this is their assistance with daily living. This is the care. Like, what care do they need to do the things that they need to do. Now, to fill this box out, you need another document. So what we use this thing called the community living plan, and I'm sure you have your own versions of this. So a care plan, a nursing care plan, whatever that might look like. What we're finding is people now have access to way more than they ever have, so people with more complex care needs are going home, and we needed a really, really detailed document. So what this document does is you can see it lists all the tasks, the level of independence, which is based on the FIM, and then assistance from. Those drop-down boxes have 1 formal support, 1 informal support, 2 formal supports, 0 formal supports, whatever it might be, so that we can clearly articulate that. The document also then builds the hours and adds them up for you. So at the bottom of the document, it spits out the number of formal supports, informal supports, by hour, by day, by everything.
You guys come up with this?
Yeah. I might have bullied a social worker who I knew had really good tech skills into doing it. Come on, I know you can do this. Anyway, so that's what we use now. Now, this has become really important because we can articulate exactly the support that people need. This might be overkill for your area. So if it is, just shove it aside and be like, I can just add up the hours, it's 15, it's fine. For people with complex support needs like high-level spinal cord injury, behavior support, ABI, that sort of thing, if they need mostly night supports, that's twice as expensive as day supports. So you need to be able to articulate what's an AM, PM, weekend, that sort of thing, because the cost could be double. Same amount of hours, but different times of day means the cost could be double. So you go back and you decide what that looks like in your area. If it's overkill, don't do it. If you're going to need to be more specific, then you might want to think about how you can collect that information. This is also really handy because when you sit at the table right before discharge and the plan manager's there and the support coordinator's there and the support agency that the participant chose is there, you just hand them that. And again, you're sitting there watching them just chat amongst themselves and sort it all out. And the plan manager takes that and maps out all the care based on all the hours and how many people are needed, and then it all just happens. And the support worker agency goes, all right, I'm going to hire people into those shifts. I see exactly what's needed, and it does make it a lot easier in the long run. So you need that in order to be able to fill out these core supports, because you need to know how many hours that you're asking for. Any questions about core support? That's where the NDIS puts most of their money. That's what people need the most. It's not where they want to put their money. They want to put it in capacity building, but the data shows where they are putting it is in core support. All right, then we have continence and consumables. So you'll see that the box just says consumables. That's what the NDIS calls it, but we split it into two. So we split it into consumables and continence. So the continence needs, we've just developed this very quick and dirty. I think this can be improved, but a way for the nursing staff to be able to document the continence needs for a person with how much they cost and how much required, so that way it can be transcribed into the consumables box or the continence box when you're explaining what is needed. How this gets ordered, I don't know what the existing system in WA is, but basically the support coordinator can just take this and then just go and order everything for the participant, or the plan manager can do that. So if that's done really well, and you get the right amount of money put in there, the plan manager or the support coordinator just takes those two things and just goes and orders everything, sets up the monthly orders, you know, all of that sort of stuff.
Can I just ask, is there any way that an assessment to just identify where they're up to, where say, for example, in a community, if you're looking at this from a community sense and want to get an assessment for continence or assessment for AIDS, and you don't want it to come out of your capacity, is there any way you can get it in core support?
Yeah, definitely. So I think I cut off this document before it shows it, but at the bottom, somewhere on here, it includes to put in continence nurse assessments for the next plan. So when someone's leaving hospital, you're thinking already in 10, 11 months' time, they need to redo their planning. They're going to need their continence reassessed. So you put that in this plan already, so it's there. But in the tools you have, it prompts that. So if you use those,
just the guys at the back, that's what we were talking earlier. So get it in there.
Yeah. So they can get their continence assessments funded. When we get to capacity building, we'll talk about ways you can do this. But basically, if you know that there's a continence service that's registered, get them to give you a letter. Get them to give you the information. You say, I need to make sure that what you need is in this person's plan. You need to tell me what you need and I'll do it. And you'll see that businesses start to get really good at coming up with these things where they say, here you go, make sure it says exactly like this in the plan, and then I'll be able to give your client the service. So you can do things like that. We'll talk about that more in capacity. The small aids, so we're gonna talk about assistive technology very minimally today, but just quickly, the NDIS rank assistive technology 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1 and 2 categories are low-risk assistive technology, urinal, non-slip mats, adaptive cutlery, those sorts of things, low-cost, low-risk items. They can all just be put in a consumables budget. So you're not having to write to the NDIA to prescribe these things. You just list them, the money gets put there, they can just purchase them. So that's what goes there. So things like slide sheets and, you know, you name it, all of those little things get put there. The transportation box is an easy one because it's a fortnightly payment that just goes into people's accounts. So fill that out, just like all the others, and then the transport allowance is paid fortnightly. We won't go into this, but there has been a court case that says that fortnightly allowance is not in accordance with the Act, that the NDIA is responsible to pay the full cost of every support that's reasonable and necessary, and it is reasonable that people will have much more transport needs than what this fortnightly allowance pays. So I leave that with you to empower clients that really need a lot more transport to fight this battle with their planners to try to get more money in this.
Is the allowance the same for everybody, is it?
No allowance for rural?
There might be, yeah. But it's not enough, like especially if you have someone that needs that can't take public transport and needs to get to work or needs to get to therapy or whatever it is.
The NDIA would not compensate for the fact that your state runs transport services in rural areas is not efficient. Or non-existent. So the fact that you do not have public transport is not NDIA's responsibility. So you will still only get the cost if they can't access. You won't get.
Yeah. But just so you know, it has been tested that that's kind of not okay. But yeah, we don't have to, in the grand scheme of things, we're not challenging that because we just don't have the time. We're just putting that in. And then we have assistance with social and community participation. So this is all the community access supports that people need. So these are support workers that come and take people into the community. The NDIS divides that sort of in-home daily assistance separate from community access. And to be quite honest, we often don't fill out this box. We just do the assistance with daily living box and just include it all in there because it's all part of the same budget. It doesn't really matter how they use it. So that we're just simplifying it a bit, but that is where it goes. If you're working in the community with someone, maybe with a psychosocial disability that doesn't need assistance with personal care, but does need assistance with community access and social, then you would just do that box.
Yes.
We need this one, reasons and that, because we always get the thing that's a parental responsibility.
Oh, right.
To care for the child.
Right.
Whereas we're arguing, well, yes it is, but not to care the way that you are required to care for a child with a disability.
You would have to really do a lot of
Reasonable and necessary, yep. Okay. So, that's core support. 4 of them, they're flexible. They're the ones that when you need to be creative about discharge, you need to really get information about them and try to work to get people home. It can take up to 12 weeks from the point that you get a funded plan to facilitate discharge. Because that's how long it takes. And just keep in mind that the person's banking that money the whole time they're in hospital. So when you plan for core supports, you're planning for 12 months, and you're building that into their plan just by the nature of they're not going to be able to use that on day one.
So from getting the plan to getting support can take 12 weeks.
Yeah, it's taking up to 12 weeks. And that's because the supports aren't as readily available. They're needing to hire people. You know, if you've got about $200,000 worth of core support, that means that a support agency needs to hire about 15 people in order to fulfill that.
The other thing that we found happening is for that first year, they allocated what they need, but because they spent 3 months of that with people training in hospital, they've got excess, and then they're being told that they'll lose it if they don't use it, and then they're panicking, so they're sort of asking for 24-hour care.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if that can be sort of mitigated by a letter explaining why they haven't used it all.
Yeah, absolutely. And every time you plan, it's a fresh plan. So if it's reasonable and necessary for you at the point of your next plan, then the NDIS has to pay for it. So they can't just say, oh, you had $70,000 last year and you only used 40, so this year we're only giving you 40. That's not how it works. I get that that's a fear, and I think that the NDIS may articulate the justification in that way, but they actually can't. So again, just like preparing for the planning meeting in this tool, for that next planning meeting, it needs to be the same. So people need to say, you need a 70 then, you need 70 now. You can't predict if people are going to end up in hospital. So you can't gyp the plan. You've got to put what they need to live in the community for 12 months. And what I try to tell health professionals, because they feel a lot of responsibility around this, this is taxpayers' money and we want to get it right and we don't want this. The NDIS has given us an unmerciful system to work in. They said you've got to plan for 12 months, come hell or high water. So that's what you've got to do. You've just got to plan for 12 months. When they evolve and mature and build up some flexibility, then we'll be able to be more realistic and practical about things. But if someone's supports aren't sufficient and there's no way for them to communicate that or get a plan review, we have to go with worst case scenario. You have to.
Yesterday we were talking about, yesterday it was mentioned about doing like a 3-month plan. What was that? That's utopia, isn't it?
So I just want to say, I mean, I love Mary Hawkins. I gave her a big stand yesterday. I don't think that's true. And certainly,
working hard for it.
Yeah, and certainly the times that I have seen short-term plans come into play, it hasn't worked out well. Because what the NDIS means is we're going to give you some money now, and they're pretending that the plan is just open, and just give us a ring when we know the rest, and we'll put it together. And it doesn't happen. I'm not saying 100% of the time it goes badly, but it's not an official thing. Like, you're not going to see in black and white anywhere a 3-month plan.
We get a few 4-month plans.
Yeah, we get 4 months and 6 months, but maybe that's an early intervention thing.
It might be. And again, it's around that reliability of, at that 3-month mark, what's going to happen.
And we expect it so they can install.
Yeah.
And not the way they sell it to us.
No, that's right.
Is that what happens?
That's right.
Well, let me tell Ricky
Not yet.
job. Balancing the math.
Yeah. And I mean, I think my advice in that space is proceed with caution.
Yeah.
Don't look at this 3-month plan as a quick win to get out of hospital. It won't be. We need to make sure that our patients are set up for 12 months because we can't be guaranteed that at that 3-month mark, it's going to go okay. But in the future it might. But now it's not.
Use it at 3 months.
Yeah, exactly.
Use it the next month.
Exactly.
So you're still finding after 2 years that it can take up to 12 weeks to get supports in place?
Yeah.
Even with big organisations that might already be, like NS, for example.
So the disability workforce is the fastest growing workforce in Australia at the moment. It's just booming. People have more money than they've ever had to spend in this marketplace. And they need to, hire staff. It's also a new business model. Even 2 years on, it's a new business model. So people aren't hiring 50 people with the hope that they're going to get the money. They're waiting till someone shows up and says, I've got $200,000, and then they're hiring the people to do that. Which is just the way it is. And I mean, if you think about it, you're trying to purchase $200,000 worth of stuff. That takes a bit of time. You can't do that in 3 days.
And it's not bad for it to be specific. I've had organisations that have specifically employed Indigenous workers to work.
That's right. Absolutely, yeah.
That makes it a reasonable.
Absolutely, yeah. And what we do, not for everybody, but specifically our spinal cord clients with spinal cord injuries or brain injuries, we get them to interview multiple care agencies, and in a few instances they've been involved in the recruitment. So they've gone to the interviews, and they've said things like, I want female carers or male carers or people of this age, and that they've been able to really sort of engage with that, which has been really positive. Yeah. Hospital execs don't like it, but it's positive. All right, capital support. So just by the nature of the word capital, these are one-stop purchases for capital items. So this is where your assisted technology and your home modifications goes. This is not flexible at all. So it cannot be used for support workers. It cannot be used for physiotherapy or occupational therapy. It is so inflexible that you can only use the capital supports for things that are articulated in the boxes. So you can't just have capital support $20,000. It needs to say power wheelchair, manual wheelchair, mechanical bed. Everything needs to be listed there in order for it to be funded.
Does that include repairs and maintenance?
Yes. Yep. So it's built into the box somewhere. I don't know if it's up here. Delivery, setup, and maintenance costs to be included for all assistive technology items. So we just leave that in there, and then that prompts it. It's just silly that we even have to do that, right? Because it's obvious if you paint. But anyway, here we go. So the assistive technology box, just like all the others, you're listing your justification. So here in the justification, according to the reasonable and necessary, you're giving a broad stroke thing. It is reasonable and necessary that this person needs assistive technology as a general concept because of their disability. Because for every piece of assistive technology, you need to do the NDIS AT prescription form. And that goes into much more detail about the reasonable and necessary for those individual items. those individual AT items. As I mentioned before, categories 1, 2, 3, and 4, this only needs to be done for categories 3 and 4 equipment that you're doing this.
And we do that too, the AT form on NDIA.
We do. If you're the prescriber, you do.
Right.
If you work in the community, as a general thing to try, NDIS registered providers should be prescribing equipment in the community, not health services, as a general thing. There's going to be pockets where that's not the case, but generally it's disability's responsibility to do that.
Brynn, have you set up because we're in kind, we're having to do AT, just navigating, it's so, they don't give you any information at all. We've tried to set up a process, stepping through to understand what step, who you email, et cetera, et cetera. Have you done that already? If you're already...
I've got to say, sorry, but we have a thing called statewide equipment program in Victoria. And they're the administrators of NDIS for us. So our system is much more straightforward, yeah. But from working with states that just go straight to the AT, you just fill out the form as best you can, cross your fingers, and wait.
And that's what we're sort of hoping to give a bit more advice to clinicians, because we've had so many clinicians all needing to do it, we're wanting to get something a bit more specific.
Yeah, no. And we do offer, at Summit Foundation, we've gone to different states and have done, full day assistive technology, prescription, home health, like how you do all of that. So it's a whole minefield in and of itself, but we don't have a lot of feedback. And, the one thing the NDIS will say is you've got to get that reasonable necessary criteria nailed in every application. And much like insurance models, if they're reading your application and they go, what about this? What about this? By the time they get to the third, what about this? It's rejected and it's gone. You've got to think about all the things that they're going to go, what about this? What about this? And say them before they think about them.
It's an art.
Absolutely.
And the access request form, there's an absolute art to filling that form.
Yeah.
So Summer Foundation, because that's, I think, going to be a gap for us. We're going to need to upskill because we're going to have to be doing quite a lot of AT.
Get in touch with Summer and they'll be able to do it. And we've been doing a lot of remote assistive technology training, like in New South Wales. So like the spinal OTs will just sit at the computer and talk it through with people. So we can do that. So, it gets better. There's more boxes under assistive technology. So if you're not an OT or a physio, maybe shut off and rest your brain for a minute. But, did someone just go for you? So items required immediately. Prescribed assistive technology. This box is for the things that you are prescribing, things that you have tested, trials that the participant is happy with, that are reasonable and necessary, you are prescribing them. You do not need to prescribe everything from an inpatient setting, but you should try to prescribe the things that you can from an inpatient setting. You list them there. We're saying that category 1, 2, 3, or 4, we're listing that. Prescription method, for you guys it's going to be directly to NDIA. The cost, and we're attaching a quote. So that way the planner knows exactly how much we're asking them to put in the plan.
And you would have had to have done the AT form for those ones that are just non-negotiable. We've got to get these together.
Yeah, all 3 and 4, you've got to do it. Yeah. This next box is equipment required for hire. The NDIS will pay for hire of assistive technology. We've got them paying for portable en-suites. Showers and toilets that get craned into the backyard of someone's house and that sit there to the tune of $4,000 a month for 12 months. They pay for the hire of that.
What's the name of that company?
Aussie Ramps. They will work nationally, but they're based out of Albury. We also have them paying for modular ramping systems. So these are ramping systems that connect together, and they're semi-permanent, and they get really extensive access things built in. So they will pay for hire. You need to list it there though, and you need to make sure you include enough money in the hire to do that. By the by, if you have a really clever support coordinator, they can use some of the core supports to hire stuff. But we don't want them to. We want them to put it in AT and get it that way. But they can hire anything. You're going to see equipment companies start to have better and bigger hire stock of stuff because this is going to become a thing.
So we've got scenarios where for equipment repair, it actually has to come back to Perth, so you'll need to have a hire. Whilst is that going there or does that go in repair?
No, put it in there.
It will need to be
put it in there. Yep.
Can you put that in there as a, a maybe, because you don't know if it's
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely, yeah, and that's that whole thing. This is what they've given us to work with, so we've got to do it. Yep. Next box. Anything that you can't prescribe in hospital, or you can't prescribe before the planning meeting, and you know that the patient is going to need it in the next 12 months. So this might be complex seating, or this might be a power wheelchair that can get over country roads and farmland and that sort of stuff that's just not practical to prescribe in the hospital. Or it might be stuff that the person is not emotionally ready to engage with and prescribe from the hospital setting. You have to list all of those items there. So power wheelchair, manual wheelchair, all the things that they're not ready, that you can't prescribe, list there. The reason is they're going to get itemized in this box, and it'll have a thing that says by quotation, which means that when that private OT, who's going to prescribe that in the community, because we're going to ask for that money in capacity building later down in the plan, when that OT gets to prescribing that, they send the AT form to NDIS, and because you listed it here, and it's itemized in the plan, NDIS will fund it. If you just put in capacity building supports for an OT to prescribe a power wheelchair that doesn't get listed here, they can prescribe all day and they're not going to get the chair because it's not listed in the plan. So you have to have both. So that's why it says list the assisted technology and trial and assessment by. Trial and assessment by is prompting you to go, in my area, OTs do this kind of prescription, so I'm writing community OT to do that assessment and trial. And then in capacity building, which we'll get to, you're articulating that again. You're saying OT is needed to prescribe that wheelchair that I put in the AT section.
And just quickly, when we say community OT, we mean community-based
NDIS-funded OT.
Yeah.
Not
we
health.
can get away with not doing it, because community OTs for health have got lots of other people to see.
Yeah. So these are private, NDIS-funded private OTs.
Would they just write, private NDIS OT? Would you actually have to specify an agency and all that?
You don't. Not at this point. No.
That's the planners. That's the support planners.
Yeah.
Support coordinator's job.
Yeah.
Or the LAC to find that person.
Yeah.
How specific do you have to be about these items? Can you sort of name it as a function, or do you have to be talking about brands?
No, just as a category.
Yeah.
So like power wheelchair, manual wheelchair, bed, stroller, pram, broad stroke categories are fine.
I think Carlo's got a question.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, so Brynn, can I just give you, just before you move on to the next section, often we will, the hospital will purchase a piece of equipment to facilitate discharge for a patient, say for instance a customised commode for a spinal patient, and then they obviously go into the community and in their plan is for that they'll require that in the long term. Is there any way to put that in the form where I suppose if that's a suitable piece of equipment for the patient, that they can keep that and NDIS then I suppose reimburses the hospital for that equipment?
No, definitely not. But if you just said to the patient, when you get this one from the NDIS, just hand it over to us, that'd be fine. They're either returning the one that you gave them or giving them the new one. Is that kind of what you mean? Yeah, but negotiate that with the patient.
Yeah, because often I suppose it's a piece of equipment, it's been customised for them, so it's not suitable for anyone else, then it's kind of a waste piece of equipment.
Yeah, you know what I would be doing in that space is that I would be talking to those providers about hiring that equipment out. And I mean, you gotta, how customized are we talking about a commode? You're talking about aperture size, double padding, unless you're talking about a molded backrest, there is a degree of transferability in that. So I would be working with those providers to say, look, we need you to beef up your hire stock. We need you to have commode seats of all varieties available for hire. This is going to be a thing. There's always going to be people with spinal cord injuries. We're always going to need to get them out and see if those equipment companies will start doing that.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah. Great, thanks. I'm so glad you asked the question. Good. So that's assistive technology, and like I said, we could talk about that all day. but we're not, just as long as you know what you need to do for pre-planning. Get the words in there where they need to go. The home modifications box. So if you work in a health service, my recommendation is that you work with your team to disinvest from major home modifications entirely. Few reasons for that. One is, major home modifications are not a discharge pathway. The NDIS is not doing them as a general thing. So there are applications that have been in for 24 months and even longer that just aren't being processed. So major home modifications will not get done in less than 12 months, and I bet $500 to anybody in the room that they won't get done in less than 24 months. So they're not a discharge pathway. Modular ramping systems, portable en-suites, those types of things are discharge pathways. Major modifications are not. What that means is that it potentially is a waste of a health resource in order to go through all this work prescribing them and applying to the NDIS for them and all that sort of stuff. The second part to that is the NDIS see major home modifications, including the prescription of it, building it, doing it, everything, as their responsibility. So what we can do in pre-planning is make sure that people have the money they need to get their major home modification assessment and prescription done. That's all we can do from a health perspective. What that looks like for us in Victoria is that we've found a company that has the right building consultants, OTs, big networks that they do this with, and they offer a one-stop shop. So we say to them, hey guys, they're Australian Home Modifications is their name. We have a client who we need a quote for because they're going to need major home modifications. What they do is they send us a quote that looks like this. And you can see that they have really specific information that's related to NDIS in this quote. We attach this to the plan. We write it in the box that they need the right supports in order to get their home modifications application submitted, and then we consider our job done. We can't control anything past the point of making sure that they've got the right resources to get their application submitted. So that's what we can control in that space, and that's how we deal with it. So if you work in an environment where this is going to be a thing, start to find out who in the community. You need private OTs, building professionals, what's the word that the NDIS uses? Building construction professionals, so BCPs. That's how they have to register themselves. And if you get an opportunity every single time, tell those private OTs to partner with these people and do it as a one-stop shop, not to have their individual businesses because it's just a nightmare to get all that coordinated. Okay.
So your OTs would still be doing a home assessment for discharge to facilitate discharge.
Absolutely, yeah.
But they're not doing big assessments around and scale drawings and stuff.
Yeah. Do you guys have a question? Online? No? Okay.
So yeah, there's obviously for people who still can go home with other options.
Yeah.
So is there anyone in the category where this is the only discharge?
Oh yeah.
And what happens?
They live in hospital.
They live in hospital. Okay.
Yeah. Or they go to residential aged care facilities and wait.
Yeah.
However, what we find is that, you know, when you ask somebody to sign the ACAS paperwork, they say no.
It's right water that we heard about yesterday.
Yeah. Could be potentially a solution.
Yeah.
They can only take specific cohorts of patients.
And they will want to know what the eventual discharge plan is. They don't want to be stuck. We would be essentially stuck with those 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And sorry, just trying to unbundle health responsibility home mod versus NDIS home mod, because that's interesting, you know, how do you distinguish between those?
What do you mean, doing them or prescribing them?
Doing them. So we will fund, the health system funds home mods.
Right.
For discharge. We do,
Okay.
yes. So
we're quite different to the eastern states.
Yes, we are.
So major mod?
Yeah.
Like upwards of 20,000 required for discharge.
It's required for discharge.
Yeah.
So is that going to be your business as usual?
No, that's what I'm trying to understand.
That'd be something to get.
I would think not.
Yeah.
But we're kind of in that awkward phase at the
moment.
moment.
So maybe we'll have to work it out. I mean, literally, the way I supported my OTs and rehab teams and stuff, it was about
Okay, so what's our responsibility for discharge?
Yeah.
And then
not for our health service now that the budget's come right down.
Yeah, I think that's definitely happening more and more.
And it'd be great if people could really think innovatively in this space, because if health services could just, $10,000 to do that thing in the bathroom, do that thing at that doorway, and just get someone out of bed, out of a hospital bed, it would go a long way.
So maybe that's a good thing for you guys if you've got a little bit of flexibility there, because sometimes it could be 5 and 10,000 and you could get someone out.
I mean, we used to be able to access that more readily. That's certainly becoming a lot harder now, and certainly 20 would be really hard pressed to get. But
Carla was saying the equipment is, if there's something temporary, like sort of a modular wrapping system, there's some sort of, raised platform for it in the shower recess that someone can sort of transmit to rather than knocking out the whole of doing the
That's right.
as a sort of, as a means.
Basic and essential, And you know what, the hindsight 2020 thing is never true, but we're able now, because we know this, that we say to patients on admission, major Mars is not your pathway home. What we need to do is start looking at this option and this option and this. So we have those conversations really early. Whereas for the first 12 months of NDIS, the conversation we was having was, let's get your health modified. It's going to be so good. And then we were like, oh, shit.
Those people are still waiting.
They're still waiting. We had feedback from our community services that were like, can you stop promising people stuff? And we were like, oh yeah, sorry, we just got carried away.
I think a big shift with Kate though, because often you'd hold for 3 months and then do the full lines on Kate, and the time frame is very different for Kate. So Kate, you could actually get something done relatively quickly. Kate gets shut down with NDIS, kind of as that. So there's going to be that interesting change in expectation that actually it is down 24 months, not potentially we could have organised something in 6 via outside of the hospital discharge process.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a large part of managing people's expectations with this transition, because we have had a pretty, from an equipment point of view, we've had a pretty amazing
So, and I think that's what we're struggling with. That we've had
staff and
we've had this great service, and now we're kind of like having to
and there's lots of mourning for some things we have lost and we're worse off.
Oh, absolutely,
But there's some that we're definitely better off. A lot more definitely better off.
The states have had to make some pretty hard decisions in order to fund the national, scheme, and that's exactly where it's come from. Just quickly around this box, this is also where SCA goes, and if anybody was at the session yesterday about SCA, that again is a 4-hour workshop all in itself, so we're not going to go there. What I will say to you is that when it comes to pre-planning, getting ready for the planning meeting, we can pretty much do 99% of it on our own. We don't need to talk to the NDIA, we don't need collaboration, we can just write it in the plan and do it. The exception is when SCA is likely to be the discharge plan, or when the person is likely to be eligible for SCA. Because we can't just put SCA in the plan, we need to have a conversation with the planner or the NDIA that says, we think this person is eligible for SCA. And then they might say, oh, okay, in order to become eligible, to be proved eligible for SCA, there is extensive reporting, allied health reporting that's required to prove that SCA is reasonable and necessary for you and that you are eligible. This reporting is so extensive that my advice and what we are trying to do in lots of states and territories is say very clearly to the NDIS that this is not health's job. We are not to do all of this reporting. That is a specific requirement of them, that if the person was in the community and wanted to prove their eligibility for SCA, they would give them thousands of dollars in their plan for a private OT and a support coordinator to do all this documentation. So we don't want them to put that on the health service, okay? We want them to say...
do on our own.
Sorry?
Impossible for a person to do on their own.
Yes, so we have had to do this because we've got someone sitting in a bed, we've got SCA that we think they are eligible for, it's vacant. We've got the NDIA saying, we're not giving you money, you do it, and we're fighting it, I'm on the emails, and it's just clear that we're not going to win on this case, and so we have to do it. I've had to pull a senior OT off the floor for 3 full days in order to do the work. So dropped her whole caseload for 3 full days. Trust you me, I got on the emails and I was like, just so you know, this is what's happening. The OT service is freezing. We can't do anything because we've got to do this to try to piss people high enough off, up so that they would do something about this. But it was the only way we could get these reporting done.
What kind of thing is it?
Well, on the Summer Foundation website, there are tons of resources about allied health reporting for SCA. But we just can't do it. I mean, as I mentioned yesterday, we've had to redesign our services. We are working on smelly, oily rags at the moment because of NDIS. So for us to do that, not okay. So my advice to you is to push back on that. But of course, you don't want somebody living in hospital just because the reports can't get done. So you work with your management to decide when it's a good option for you to do that and when it's not. But that's where SCA goes. They fund it in there, and off we go. But we wanna not be in that business if we can. All right, we've done core, we've done capital. The core, all those basic core support workers and everything, your continence, your transport. We've done capital, listing all your assistive technology, the ones that you can prescribe, the ones that you want hired, the ones that need to be prescribed later, listing that all. Now we're going to talk about capacity building support. So these are the 9 capacity building supports. And just like the words indicate, these are supports required to improve or build someone's capacity to participate in life. And I'm going to not go through all of them because there's 9 of them. And to be quite honest, there's several of them that I don't even understand what they are at the moment. Finding, keeping a job, and there's lots of stuff that I think might have to do with like younger people with intellectual disability or maybe people with primary psychosocial impairment that I haven't had a lot of interaction with. But we'll go through some of them. So the capacity building supports the boxes look just the same. There is one key box, which is we call CB Daily. You'll hear a lot of people call it CB Daily. So capacity building daily. So improve daily living skills is the full title. This is where your private therapies go. This is where your OT, your physio, your speech, everything like that goes. There is an exception, of course. Dietetics and exercise physiology, they go in CB, improve health and well-being. Whereas every other allied health discipline goes into the CB Daily, improve daily living.
I'm sure you've got lots of private nutritionists out there in the country just lolling around.
Yeah, that's right.
Ready to jump into Anyway, just in case one comes along,
right.
Go in here.
So, you're looking down the barrel of 12 months, you're trying to write down all the allied health support the participant could need. How do you know how many hours of support a private OT needs to do anything? And the reality is we don't. Yeah. So there's a few ways to go about this. You can have a guess, and if you guess, triple it and request for that, because then maybe that'll be enough. If you are in an area where the provider market is really picking up and there's services that are switched on to NDIS and they see what's coming, what I recommend is you approach them, if your client has chosen them. You approach them and you say, right, these are the things this patient needs. They need a power wheelchair prescribed. They need help with their self-feeding. They need help with their communication. They're right on the edge. They're going to be able to do these things. Can you give me a quote for the amount of money that you would need to do this over the next 12 months? And as the market matures, they're going to get really good and they're going to give you these beautiful quotes with all the line items in it, and they're going to write some reasonable and necessary criteria, and it's just going to be schmick, and you just attach it to your pre-planning tool and off you go. The reality is that's not going to happen for a long time. Yeah. In the meantime, have a punt, take a guess. If you think someone needs a power wheelchair prescribed, I don't know if anybody has private experience or whatever, but you might say, look, they need 60 hours to do that. And I think that would probably cover it. That's certainly what we were doing at the start until people started telling us what they needed. Now, if you're supporting a participant that doesn't have highly specific make it or break it things, like if they don't get this power wheelchair, they're not going to be able to get out of bed kind of thing. But if they just need someone to support them with their carer training, or review their care plan, or check their maintenance programs, that sort of thing, you might just do something like 3 hours of physio every month for 12 months and add that up. Or 4 hours of OT every month for 12 months and add that up. That's okay. I think in the space that we're working in, if it's not something specific, you just take a general 12-month approach and put it in. Yeah.
When do you find what we've seen here is you get a band, you get a low band, medium band, or high band, you get 8, 12, or 17,000, and that's it for your therapy? way that reads doesn't seem like.
Oh, no.
That's against the
It's
legislation.
like, yeah, that's absolutely not true. I've heard all sorts of things. Oh, you get 10 hours times 3. Not true.
No, but this is actually in their plan.
Oh, I'm sure it is, but it's not legal.
Right.
Yeah. But that's where the reasonable and necessary criteria comes in. So if you don't demonstrate beyond all reasonable doubt that they need exactly what you asked for and it's reasonable and necessary, I'm sure they're going to come up with another way to determine that, which is, I'm telling you, it's 3 times 3, you know? So yeah.
I don't have it, it's like a random. Because I mean,
Oh, yeah, totally.
we've got one little girl who's developmentally normal but has a small jaw, and then she's got a full high package, and then we've got other kids who are really disabled, and they've got the low band.
Yeah.
But how do we demonstrate that if we're taking a guess?
Yeah, you can't when you're taking a guess, and that's what I mean when I say triple it.
Yeah.
Because if that's all we can do is guess, then we've got to make sure they have enough.
You can demonstrate the reasonable and necessary part of it, which is that, you know, you're needing to say why these supports are needed. Okay, so it's maintenance of a gain made in rehab to be able to achieve your goals, whatever. So that no one else can do it, there's no mainstream service to do it because they've finished their rehabilitation.
They're in maintenance.
They're in maintenance phase, no other mainstream service can do it. Their father can't do it because he's a therapist. It's required a specialty input to maintain. So you see all that reasonable and necessary coming in. The numbers, you can get the number a bit wrong or right, but you've still got to nail the reasonable and necessary.
I think constantly we're getting people coming in who've exhausted their allied health hours. So if you're saying they need more allied health on discharge and they're really in maintenance, they were in hospital for something completely different.
That's right.
There's no allied health hours left, then they can't.
Yeah. And you know, the private practitioners out there, they're starting to build awareness for themselves about how much time it takes them to do this. You know, maybe before they weren't necessarily accounting for that because they were just billing. They're like, I saw you for 3 hours, I'm billing you for 3 hours. But now they know. So private OTs out there are saying, I know it takes 67 hours of my time to prescribe a custom power wheelchair. So if someone shows up on their doorstep with a plan that doesn't have that money in it, they just reject them.
Yeah.
They're just saying, I'm not engaging in this service because my $175 an hour quickly drops to $50 an hour because you don't have enough money in your plan. So it's a tricky space, this, and you know, it rabbit holes quickly. There's rehab assistants, there's AHAs that can work in this space. They're going to ask that support workers carry out some of the rehab programs, and I don't even understand all that necessarily yet. So we're just going with allied health to do it. Some of our quotes do come back with allied health or rehab assistant stuff in it because the companies themselves have hired those people, and they'll do it at cheaper rates. And then I just trust that they know what they're doing and attach the quote. Yeah. Any questions about capacity building? No. And again, you're offering choice, so you're saying these are the providers in your area, pick one, and then you're working with them to get some quotes. Same thing for dietetics and EPs. Improve relationships, so this is the behavior support category. And again, this is a really, really important one to get quotes on because if someone needs behavior supports and a positive behavior support plan, there is definitely a minimum number of hours that are going to be needed in order to achieve an outcome. You wouldn't want someone tracking really well with a behavior support plan to then just stop tracking well because the money went dry. So find out who is registered in your area for behavior supports. And start working with them on getting an understanding of what you need from them, what they need to give you in order to make sure people's plans include it. Okay. Cool. Improve life choices. So this is the plan management box. And the discipline guide, when you go through each discipline, they tell you which box you need to do. So if you're an OT, in your discipline guide, it lists every single one of these boxes under your name and all the things that you need to do. So this is a box that's dedicated to social workers. So in their part of the discipline guide, it says, hey, social workers, this is your responsibility when you get to pre-planning. And they just do the same thing about plan manager. So the social worker supports the person to choose a plan manager and then fills out this box. it's a set amount, so we don't need quotes from plan managers. Coordination of support, so this is where we list the support coordination. We don't get quotes from support coordinators because I don't think it is humanly possible to actually know how much support coordination a person's going to need over a 12-month period, even if you are a support coordinator yourself. So we're just picking random amounts. If the person's very complicated and has really minimal really minimal informal supports available, we're just going full hog and we're saying we need, 150 hours worth of support coordination to make sure this gets off the line, and justifying that really clearly according to the reasonable and necessary criteria.
You kind of just think how much you think they might need a week and then just go from there.
Yeah. And there's 3 different types of support coordination. So there's coordination of support coordination, and complex support coordination. Just know it as support coordination, the middle band. That's what 99.9% of people get. Complex support coordination, you have to be a health professional to do that, so an OT, a social worker, or a psychologist. And those are for people who have complex behaviors to manage, may be involved in the judicial system, educational needs. They need to interface with many, many systems to keep them well and okay in the community. You want to ask for complex support coordination in those instances, but you need to justify it within an inch of its life in order to get it off the ground. It's a very expensive support, and the NDIS doesn't necessarily want to give it willy-nilly. Whereas coordination of supports, most of these people have some sort of disability background, but not necessarily, and the hourly rate for these supports is much less than it is for the complex support coordination. Good.
What's that specialist support coordination then? Is that the same?
That's complex support,
okay.
Yeah, complex support coordination, sorry. So that's pre-planning. We only went through a few of the boxes in capacity building, but they're the most important ones usually. So you've done all that. The participants talking about it with you, you know what's going in there. The team's contributing to it. You have it saved on the hard drive, and everybody's just populating it as the weeks go on, as things become clear. And now you get a phone call from the NDIA and you say the planning meeting is going to be scheduled at this date and time, and the first thing you do is make sure the participant or the patient you're working with knows that they do not have to accept the date or time that the person gives them, that they get to choose when the plan happens. There is a such thing as having a planning meeting too soon. Chances are that's not what we're going to experience, but when we started to roll out, we were the only health service for a while, and then the plan started happening really quickly, and that was a bit scary. But the plan needs to happen at the right time. It needs to happen when the pre-planning tool is completed, when the participant and their family are needed. It has to happen has to happen where they want it to, when they want it to, all those sorts of things. The planning meeting is I've never talked to anybody who's described this as anything but a horrible, horrible experience. And I have some colleagues that I work with who are NDIS participants, and they just said they've never felt worse in their life than the lead up to it, actually going through it, and the weeks afterwards. And there's a lot of reasons for that. It's not totally the NDIS's fault, but this idea that everything about your life from that point forward hinges on this 1 to 2 hour meeting. The fact that they get to the meeting and they realize that they know way more than that person across the table, and in fact that person across the table knows absolutely nothing about what it's like to have, you name it, the list continues. Then they realize that the conversation that we have in a planning meeting isn't actually about the supports. We don't actually go through everything a person needs. It's about these really confronting, often extremely inappropriate standardized questions and assessments that the planner, the floor planner, it's not their fault, has to ask as part of their job. So they do things like disability scales and satisfaction skills, and they say like, are you satisfied with the relationships you have in your life? Do you have enough friends? Do you have enough? And these people are just like, it's horrible. It's horrible. So what we can do is we can prepare people for that. We don't want to go in there and tell them this is going to be the worst experience of your life. But we do want to say, now look, we've put all this work in. We've got the pre-planning tool. We've done all this work. It's okay. I just want you to know whatever happens in that meeting, we're going to debrief about it later. Your supports will get funded. We've done this, just to build their confidence with that.
And then they don't actually tell you what you're going to get in that meeting. And the NDIS knows that this is a problem, and they have a pilot going on in New South Wales at the moment to fix this, so that people can get told the things that they're going to get in that meeting. They're going to be like, it's very clear to me that your support hours are reasonable and necessary. Tick. You clearly need a power wheelchair. Tick. You know, but right now they don't do that. And then it can take several weeks afterwards for them to find out what's coming. So in general, it's a really terrible experience. This is important for your wider health team to know, for the night shift nurses to know, for the psychologists to know, for the social workers to know, because if the patient starts acting up or doesn't show up to therapy or is just having a really crap few weeks, this is probably why. You know, it's really a cliff edge that these patients are faced with around this. I'm pointing to the slide, and it's not the right one. So the pre-planning meeting is really important to have these conversations, to provide assurance that it's all been articulated, it's going to go okay, that's all right. So that's what we do in that pre-planning meeting. Now we've got planning. So now we're waiting for this meeting to happen, and the meeting happens. What we recommend is that one, if max two people from the health team go to these planning meetings. When we arrive, like the Great Wall of China, with our arms crossed, ready for battle, it does not go well for anybody. So, the best thing we can do is build confidence in our team who are really worried because we're there to help the patient, and we need to be there, and I know them well, and the best thing they can do is get into that document, is learn German and get into that document. Being there and greasing off the planet is not going to help, but writing in that document definitely will. So the more empowered you are, get in there and do it. And then there's just someone there, and we recommend it's the OT, because we coordinate the pre-planning tool. Most of the supports in there we put in there, so it makes sense that we're there because we've got this bigger picture. However, if someone has behaviors of concern, the psychologist might come. Or if someone has an accommodation barrier, there's no identifiable accommodation, maybe the social worker comes too. So that way there's an opportunity to say, look, we need to work with you, NDIS. We need to communicate now about this. It's important to say that the NDIS have a big fear, and I think a really reasonable fear, that they don't want to get into this direct person-to-person communication and argy-bargy for every single participant that they have. They are saying to the world, sort it out, meet with us, tell us what you need, and we're going to give it to you, and that's it. They don't have the capacity to work through every little detail of everything, except for when it comes to accommodation. They have to be willing, and generally they are, to partner and communicate and work with us to solve the problems around accommodation. So that's what we need to expect. And in your mind, you should be saying, that's all right, I've got everything else, done everything else. What I need you to do is help us find an accommodation solution for this thing.
Why is that the one issue, the accommodation one?
Because we can't do anything about that without their permission. So we can't do anything about accommodation without them saying, oh yeah, they're eligible for SDA, here's the money for it. So you can't go find SDA accommodation unless they give you the money. You know, so we have to partner with them around finding those solutions to accommodation. And were you at the yesterday? Yeah. So you know there's all those different levels of accommodation, so like fully accessible, robust, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So all that, the NDIS needs to determine all of that before you can go looking for what.
And that's why we asked for the, trying to remember the figures, I think we asked you to something like so many hours of support coordination just to investigate SCA, and then so many hours of allied health hours to investigate housing SCA options. Yep. So that's all our job is, to just say, yes, we think they could be eligible for SCA, we think this many hours should be in their plan to assess access for eligibility for SCA.
We can't rock up to the meeting being like, they definitely qualify for robust design, SCA, we can't rock up and just say that. It's the thing the NDIS have to say.
I'm just wondering why they've taken that particular issue as such a control over accommodation rather than anything else.
Because it costs $100,000 a year for the rest of the person's life. Yeah. Big ticket item. Yes. They only intend for 6% of the people 6,000 people. 6,000 people?
6%, I said yes.
6% of people to be eligible for SDA. So they're holding that tight.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know how long we should expect to wait between an access, sort of granted access and a planning meeting?
Yeah, it fluctuates big time. So we'll have people sometimes call in a week and be like, let's do planning. And then we'll 3, 4, 5 months sometimes for planning.
And you can't do anything about that?
You can call our social workers, every morning. When's the planning? But like I was saying yesterday, we collect data on that so we can see, and there's just no rhyme or reason. I reckon they hire a new planner, and then they take the 5 off the pile and go, there you go, and then all of a sudden you get a phone call. And don't forget, once everybody's onboarded, the only people the NDIS are going to have to worry about are new disabilities and people who are born. It's just right now they're trying to onboard every single Australian with a disability. So it's just short term. It'll be 5 years before we see any improvements in that, I think. But it is short term.
And that's why Jenny was talking yesterday about having your own state escalation process, because there will, if you've got someone stuck in hospital waiting 3 months for a planning meeting, that's not on. So they have to work out. WA Health has to work out with NDIA how to prioritise this.
So plan implementation, we get the plan, and when I mean we get the plan, it can come in a number of forms. So sometimes it gets emailed to the participant, sometimes it gets emailed to the person in the health team who was on the contact of the access request form. Sometimes it ends up in a post box somewhere, who knows, but we all just scramble and ask the questions. Where's the plan? Who's got the plan? Anybody see the plan? And then eventually it shows up somewhere, and then we look at it. And what we say in the discipline guide is that it's every discipline's responsibility to check in with the OT and say, did the thing that I asked for in the plan get there? And then they'll say, yep, and then you work with the participant and the support coordinator to implement those supports that you help them get in the plan. But as we mentioned, this is the key bit for the support coordinator. You really want that plan manager, the support coordinator, the support worker agency to all be sitting around the table with a copy of the plan, with your care plan, and just say, right, this is how we're going to make the whole thing work. That's really what it takes to do that. And then health do the thing we normally do. So our normal health referrals, our normal discharge summaries, all that other sort of stuff.
Permanent contact when they're not good? Is there a certain profession that's there, or?
Yeah, in our team it's the social worker. We just keep the social worker as the contact. Yeah.
Brynn, can I just ask a question about other people participating, whether we're talking the broader health team or broader team in that pre-planning? So I'm thinking about the context where someone's from the country, and they're probably going to be discharged back to a general hospital in the country, but you're doing your pre-planning. Do you engage with the local providers around assisting with that pre-planning, because they're obviously going to have better insights into
local providers or local health?
Local health. So the assumption is they're going to the hospital, the next hospital, which will be in the country, for the more complex ones. But I'm just thinking if there would be value in having that team also participate in pre-planning, because they know where the client's going, essentially. Or there may be other agencies that are involved with that person that may be beneficial to participate in that plan.
Potentially. I think the reality on the cold face is this is really hard work, right? Really, really hard work. We're talking about big health teams, multidisciplinary health teams, and the system has no mercy. So the reality is, this is often not going to go well. I'll give you an example. So we have a statewide community spinal cord service, and they're constantly calling me, being like, we need to give the inpatient team feedback. They're botching this. It's not going well. The plans are crap. It doesn't blah blah blah. And they just think that the inpatient health team had some control over that. And so what I try to get people to understand is that you have to do the best you can with where you're at, right? The system is telling us you need to guess as to what this person needs. So there's going to be some scenarios where there is time, there is the right people, there's the right connections where, yes, you can bring those people in to develop that pre-planning tool. I reckon 75% of the time, you're just like, what am I doing today? Who's going, blah, 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 blah. The planning meets tomorrow. And that's what happens. And then it's nobody's fault that the second that planning meeting happens, that plan is sealed in gold, and there's just nothing you can do about it. So, yes, but I don't want people to think that that's what they should do every time, because the reality is
it's just going to be too hard. I think 3 or 4 years from now, where everybody understands this a lot better and we can communicate really efficiently about it, then I think that's the time to do it. And what I try to tell people in the community is, don't assume that your inpatient health colleagues or people from another hospital didn't do what they were supposed to do, because sometimes we do that pre-planning tool to a T, and the plan that comes out the other end is not the one we asked for, and then you can't do anything about it. So feedback's really important to the people who are doing this, but we have to give them feedback on the pre-planning tool, not on the plan that came out. So if you can see that they put that work in the it was all there, it was in the tool, and then for some reason the plan didn't come that way, we're working through what that might be, but not just to say that, you know, you didn't plan for this, or you didn't know, that sort of thing. But yeah, we're not doing that. So our patients that go regional, even our patients that go to Tassie, we get a lot of chronic patients that go to Tassie, we're not in a position to engage with them that much at all. And I think it would be great, but it's just a mad scramble, you know?
Are they in-kind providers in Tassie though? Like WACS here will be an in-kind provider, so likelihood is we'll be getting handover, like pre-planning and plans, where we will be the provider rather than a private provider.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, Tassie's not doing a lot of in-kind support at all. South Australia are. And that's a whole tricky, it's a very, very tricky
Well, that's
thing.
transfer of care, so that is different, that is an expectation you would do that.
Yeah, and I guess what I'm reflecting on here is like, so you know this person's going to this regional area, there's a health service there, you do the pre-planning tool. I mean, do you have time to send that to them, have a meeting, negotiate about it, what do you think? They haven't met the person, you know, so they don't understand. Also, you know, the human factor about this is that you're going to be talking to patients and they're going to be like, I want 25 times as much as that. Or I don't want that, I don't need that, I don't need support workers, I don't need a wheelchair. You know, that human element to it is just like, so you end up with this thing that's just like, we made the best of the situation, and often it's not ideal, you know. And then people get home or they get to the local area and they're like, I really didn't need that, you know. But this, you know, for hell or high water, the inpatient therapists can't get them to agree at the time, you know, that's the thing. Yeah. Great question. So, the answer...
you need to know who they are, those questions.
Yes, okay. So, this is my opinion, this is not your health government's opinion, so you need to check. But this is what it's looking like across the country. One is, the NDIS has acknowledged that that's a gap in their process. So they have people all over the country, as we were talking about before, show up, they hired yesterday, they show up, they go and meet the person with spinal muscular atrophy type 1 to do planning. And they sit there and they go, oh, shit, I have no idea what this person needs. They don't know what they need. Their parents don't speak English. What are we going to do? So the NDIS knows that that's a problem. What they're doing and they're trialing in New South Wales at the moment is a panel of registered providers who the NDIS then funds to do the assessments required to inform them about what's needed in the plan. So the call that you're getting right now is people trying to do that backdoor. People trying to be like, I bet you I can call the health service and they'll just do it for free. So my advice, again, not the advice of your health government, is that we say no, that's the NDIS's responsibility to do. You need to ask your planner to release some money, give you some money, so that you can go pay providers to do those assessments for you.
If they are our patients.
Yes. If they're already on your books, so if they were admitted to your service because they meet the eligibility criteria and you would have provided the service to them way before NDIS, then that's very appropriate to support them with their planning. What we don't want health services to do is take patients on just for the purpose of pre-planning, you know, which they are being asked to do.
And you probably get good at developing your own template, dietitians, yeah? One thing I did with our dietitians, that we developed our own, that they're known to us. Okay, what is it that they're going to need to know? So we developed our own kind of plan.
Are these for outpatients though? Outpatients?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So I guess thinking on that side, so the referrals we're getting from an OT perspective, GP requesting this person once registered with NDIS, can you do a functional, we need all this information we can be advising them they could go back
Yeah, that's
to
right.
NDIS and
So many people, the power of the pro forma letter. So many services are just coming up with this very generic letter and just sending it out to everybody on their books. You know, that says, so our orthotics and prosthetic service, for example, does that. They send it to everybody who they've ever seen, and it says, if you go to planning, this is what you need. Put this in your plan. It's very generic. Who knows if it's what the person needs? It's an overestimate, but they know that when those patients come to them eventually, they're going to have what they need. Similarly, you might contact the GPs in your area and just say, just so you know, we don't provide these assessments, but here's a list of registered providers that do, and then that can, you know, stop your phones ringing off the hook.
And just a step back, if you're talking about access, remembering that I think there is this misconception within the community that you need all these functional assessments for access. You don't. So a GP who knows that patient well can actually fill out an access request form and there is documents that NDIS have done, there is YouTube that they can watch about how to do that. I will send out a link to psychosocial disability. At the first 5 minutes of it, I show the GP how to do that. So I think be careful of just, we don't do assessments for access in health, because you guys got a lot of other things to be doing. But also that you need all this documentation to evidence for access. No, a GP who knows them well can do it without the access request form.
As long as it's in German.
And that's what they're going to get better. And no wonder they're pushing it back to us, because it's hard. But they've got to learn this language of German as much as what we have had to do.
With the sort of coaching, with the ECI partners coming in, they are required to do PDCAT. So there's no point, because we're doing it at PCH on our iPads, but they are required to do that.
Yeah.
So
you know what to 7, the referral pathway will be to your ECI provider.
It's not their NDIS actually have a clause where they have to fund. If they're requesting specific assessments for access, they actually have to fund.
That's right, absolutely, yeah. And in a lot of places, they don't have the systems to do that, so when you push that back on them, they're like, what? But they do, and they will develop those systems.
So once someone has been granted access, but they haven't yet had their plan, they can then request that the assessments that they need for that planning be funded as part of their plan.
If they're not,
but they'll have to pay up front.
Only if
it's required, though, if the NDA is saying they require it.
And
Otherwise, no.
And if you look at, if you Google New South Wales complex pathway, complex NDIS pathway, it's just in its pilot, you know, they're just piloting it, this notion, and they use terminology like, should the participant choose to have assessments done for planning, the NDIS is responsible to pay for them, you know, that kind of, should they choose.
They really say no, don't they?
So we're about almost 10 past 12, and we were going to finish up at 12:15 anyway and do some questions. And I've got a plane to catch. So we were going to do some more reasonable and necessary stuff to get into some heavy detail about it. It'll be in the slides. To be honest, if you're not doing this regularly at the moment, it's not worth wasting your brain space on this now.
And the
but
language
just so you know,
is there, the
yeah.
examples there, that's
That's
right.
Where do we get?
We're going to email it to
We'll
you.
send that to you.
Yeah.
Can you call for a review before the 12 months?
You can, but it won't happen.
Okay.
Want a reviewable decision? Yes.
You already have a package?
Yes.
That needs
Yes.
So in the Productivity Commission report that the NDIA did, they blasted them for this issue, that they promised a key feature would be the ability to review plans, review decisions, and the NDIA intends to do that. The fact is they do not have capacity to do it. So it's not happening. So what we say to people is that a plan review will not happen in less than 6 months. And all we're doing is asking our colleagues, did you get that plan reviewed? Did you get it? And everybody's like, nah. So we're estimating 6 months. Eventually the story will change, and we'll start to hear that they're happening, and then we'll change our story and say, oh, we think in 2 months. You know.
Sometimes what happens is they just bring forward the plan review. So if they're saying this is plan's not meeting the needs, and they may just bring forward the plan review. But there is a change of circumstances form.
Yeah.
So people understand the difference. So change of circumstances, say for example, something has happened.
And that's the thing that came from this, but we're working on escalation pathways within WA Health, and they are around certain criteria and like safety of the participant or safety of the carers around them. So if there's any of those criteria, you can escalate that through your own health reference group, your own NDIS group, and then they can escalate it direct to the NDIA here in WA. And we're just working on those pathways.
Just following up on that thought, for example, psychosocial disability, often develop comorbidities as they travel along, so they need to change.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you're talking about primary disabilities, this is an NDIS with the mental health condition, although it's a functional impairment, but then develop dependencies. Oh, we need an OT assessment because somebody can't shower properly. Is that what that's designed for, that escalation sort of issue? Because currently, it's almost impossible to get a review of that sort of situation and move sideways on the plan.
It depends on the individual circumstances and how much of this that person wants. And if they were at great risk of falling or, a major decline in their health or whatever, then yes, I would say that is a pathway.
And what is the pathway to escalate things for us?
At the moment, you would go to your own NDIS group and to your health reference group member. But because here in the North Metro, it's John Buchanan in the East Metro, it's Belinda Whitworth in the Southern Metro, and it's Suzanne in WAC, and it's me in CARS. So at the moment, we're the funders. But we will get to the point that Royal Perth has 4 people, and Charlie's has people, and Sloan Stanley has people, and WAC has people, and, the mental health sector has people who can escalate to various people in the NDIA here in WA. And that's the work that we're currently working on at the moment with them as well. The problem we have at the moment is the NDIA doesn't have those people sorted. They've got 5 people who are doing mainstream engagement across the entire state. And we're one part of that. The other part of that is education, there's justice, there's housing, there's childcare. So they don't have a lot of staff at the moment. But we do have the name of one person that if you if something happens like that, you could go to not anymore. Love sending out emails, but you go to me, to Suzanne, to John, and whatever, and we go to them.
Oh God, the secret of who they are, but
That's normal in states. You need to have that. They don't want you to go straight. They don't want every clinician.
No,
exactly.
It's really important.
It's really important.
It needs to come through.
And your health management might have a solution.
Part of that morning process you're talking about, because previously we were engaged at the front of the whole process.
I'm never more cynical in my life when anybody ever asks me about escalation with the NDIA. It's not a thing. It's not a thing. Like, I have never experienced, I have one escalation pathway, and it's because I met someone really high up through this job at the Summit Foundation. I was super nice to her. I pick very strategically the things that I email her about when I am so certain that everything is just perfect and there's this one thing, and then we escalate it. But again, I'm cynical, but I just want people to know, I don't want people to think that when stuff gets tough, you're going to be able to tell someone who tells someone who tells someone and it gets solved. The clear message from the NDA is you need to try to do this and figure it out, and then when we get to the point where there is a blazing gap that the NDIA are the only ones that can tick this box, that's the stuff that we want to be
The only strategy I've got to deal with at the moment is to try and push it back to the current NGO provider.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, use them, absolutely.
There's a massive disconnect between mental health and physical health, and so there's a lot of people out there that are getting mental health plans, a few examples, but none of their physical health plans being developed by the NGO that's doing mental health.
Absolutely.
And they're the ones, I think, that are falling to gaps.
They're a lot of the ACT ones.
Absolutely.
But is there something to build that into the plan? Like, it's sort of us that are doing it. Like,
you know,
We need to
if it
collaborate
happened,
more.
it is anticipated that, you know, they might need showering assistance, you know.
It'd be hard to demonstrate, like, it's hard to put anticipated safe gaps in according to the reasonable and necessary criteria. That's tough. That is tough. So if it's a support that someone currently needs and you're just asking for a bit more, JIC, that's a bit okay. But if it's something that they categorically don't need right now, I think you think they might.
It's not being looked at because the person who's developing the plan is only looking at the mental health. They're not looking at the fact that he can't clean the shower. They're just looking at that. So they develop this lovely plan.
Absolutely,
and then an OT comes in from somewhere else and goes, oh, right, you can't clean your shower, but...
And none of it's in the plan, so I can't find it.
I can't get into the shower to the disability.
So what we need...
But I think it's being done by...
But we need to have more communication between physical and mental health somewhere, and I don't know how to do that, to get, so that when whoever's developing the mental health plan goes, or maybe I just better check if there's anything needed.
We're making
I
sure...
don't know how we do that.
On our local NDIS reference group, we're making sure that we have mental health reps on that and forgotten his name.
We do.
Anyway.
Do you know what the state governments have done though, and this is consistent nationally? The NDIS doesn't separate mental health and physical disability. The health government always has, and continues to do so.
Exactly.
So they fund projects in the state. They fund mental health NDIS projects, and then they fund physical disability mental health projects. They set up reference groups that don't bring those people together. So I think the strategy is make sure at the state level that all these people are sitting at the same table together. They're not mutually exclusive.
They're currently sitting at the level underneath the Department of Premier and Cabinet. We have people there from the Mental Health Commission and from mental health, and then all the other areas.
I think within individual health service providers, though, we're still very
absolutely.
And I think education's going on completely separately. So there's people, they're doing capacity building in mental health and we're doing it in physical, but we're coming together. So.
Vicky, I can send you, there was a letter, like it was a template we were given by the guys that are working with Queensland Health, and it's a really great letter where they describe this participant, I think he has schizophrenia, and they describe him as they describe him as worse, and it's episodic, and they do list all that stuff in it, and they're having a lot of success in getting really good plans, because they sat down and did exactly what Brynn has done, but they did it from a psychosocial disability and looked at what's reasonable and necessary and looked at the act, and that's what they do, they write it in NDIS. Great.
I'm going to shoot. But thank you, Brynn. You're very welcome. Really great. Thank you, Virginia.
I'm happy to hang around for a little bit. My time goes a bit later. So people that if there's things you want to chat to about, if you've had enough, that's okay too. Because cautiously optimistic. That's how you should feel. Not thrilled, not energized. Please do the end of training survey though, because it would be great to get your thoughts.
Oh my God, and the data that we have from around the country.